On va parler aussi de discussions sur tout ce qui est genre, diversité et lutte contre la corruption. Et on va finir maintenant, qu'est-ce qui serait être le futur du bien-être au travail dans nos administrations des douanes. Et pour cela, on a encore d'excellents et d'éminents panélistes qui vont partager avec nous leurs expériences, leurs apprentissages, mais aussi des recommandations pratiques de ce qu'ils ont fait dans leurs administrations. Hier, nous avons eu la chance de rêver et de croire qu'on pourrait rêver d'un futur extraordinaire pour les administrations des douanes, mais encore aujourd'hui, j'ai aucun doute que les panélistes qui ont été choisis ont été un peu choisis selon des critères bien ciblés pour rendre un peu cette conférence avec un grand succès. Alors, je m'attarde maintenant sur le panel 4, où on va parler de gestion du stress et santé mentale et physique. Alors, la santé et le bien-être sont des termes universels qui peuvent désigner de nombreux aspects différents de l'expérience des employés au travail, à la fois du psychosocial au physique. Avant la COVID-19, les discussions sur la santé mentale se concentraient principalement sur la gestion des niveaux de stress. Mais en pleine crise, la santé mentale est mieux perçue à travers le prisme d'un amalgame de facteurs, y compris l'environnement du travail, les particularités individuelles, notamment liées à l'âge, à l'expérience, au diplôme, au niveau de résilience. Mais au milieu de la pandémie de COVID-19 et même aujourd'hui, des millions de personnes dans le monde ont fait une transition soudaine vers des nouveaux modes de travail, que ce soit le travail à distance ou que ce soit complètement un travail de type mixte. Sans surprise, certains employeurs, certains managers ont été préoccupés, malheureusement, seulement par le maintien de la productivité de leurs employés sans aucun soutien. Mais ce dont ils devraient vraiment se préoccuper dans ces circonstances inédites, c'est un risque à plus long terme de ce que je peux appeler l'épuisement professionnel. Le risque est conséquent. Les frontières entre le travail et le non-travail s'estampent de manière nouvelle et inhabituelle, et les employés qui sont engagés de manière affective à l'organisation se trouvent souvent dans des situations incroyables de leur vie et où ils doivent gérer des éléments de leur santé mentale, de leur santé physique. Ce qui amplifie la chose, c'est la peur et l'incompréhension qui ont causé beaucoup de stigmatisation et de banalisation autour de la notion du stress et de la santé mentale et physique. Ce qui a amené de nombreuses personnes à moins penser à une personne en raison de son état. La stigmatisation peut amener des personnes à sombrer dans la honte, se sentir rejetées, blâmées et même blessées physiquement. La stigmatisation s'ajoute à la souffrance causée par la maladie mentale ou physique. Cela empêche également de nombreuses personnes atteintes de maladie mentale de demander de l'aide. Comme mentionné hier, comme par hasard, cette conférence coïncide avec la Journée mondiale de la santé mentale, célébrée chaque année le 10 octobre par l'OMS. Et c'est l'occasion de sensibiliser l'opinion publique aux questions de santé mentale, physique et aussi du stress. Je vais partager avec vous quelques statistiques qui sont très alarmantes et qui nous incitent tous à prendre cette question avec le plus grand sérieux qu'elle mérite. Il faut dire que le constat ne porte pas à l'optimisme. Rien que dans la région européenne de l'OMS, on estime que 50% des personnes dépressives et 20% de celles atteintes de schizophrénie ne reçoivent aucun traitement médical spécifique. Tous les 40 secondes, une personne met fin à ses jours. Chaque année, ce sont pas loin de 800 000 personnes qui mettent fin à leur jour et d'autres, plus nombreuses encore, qui font une tentative de suicide. Chaque suicide est une tragédie qui frappe une famille, une communauté, un pays et qui laisse beaucoup de séquelles, non seulement sur la personne, mais aussi sur son entourage. Le suicide touche des personnes de tout âge et est la deuxième cause de décès dans le monde parmi les 15 et 29 ans. Le thème retenu pour l'édition de cette année est de faire de la santé mentale pour tous une priorité mondiale. D'ailleurs, la raison pour laquelle nous allons, dans le cadre de cette conférence, et j'ai l'immense plaisir d'avoir d'éminents panélistes qui vont partager avec nous leurs propres expériences de comment gérer. Alors, nous, on est dans une phase maintenant de comment faire face. Alors, j'ai l'immense plaisir d'accueillir Madame Melinda Wizina, à ma gauche, fondatrice de Caridima et formateur, coach, facilitatrice, et là, qui va nous parler d'un outil, ou je ne sais pas, honnêtement, à notre discussion, j'aimerais voir un peu qu'est-ce que vous allez partager avec nous de la cohérence cardiaque. J'ai aussi l'immense plaisir d'accueillir Madame Andrea Bright-Human, qui se connecte à partir de Washington, sous-commissaire, bureau de la gestion des ressources humaines au niveau des services de douane et de la protection des frontières des États-Unis. Alors, exceptionnellement, et vu l'importance de cette thématique, nous allons organiser ce panel sous forme d'atelier et où les deux panélistes vont partager avec nous deux présentations et après, on va ouvrir. Là, je suis sûr, là, je vais garder ma promesse, on va ouvrir pour les questions de la part de ceux qui sont avec nous en présentiel, mais aussi de ceux qui sont en ligne. Alors, sans plus tarder, je cède la main à Melinda pour nous présenter son expérience en matière de gestion du stress. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, merci beaucoup, Sia Mohamed. Merci beaucoup à l'OMD de donner l'occasion de découvrir cet outil merveilleux de la cohérence cardiaque. Je vais vous partager mon écran si tout va bien. Voilà. Voilà. Ben oui, donc le contexte, c'est bien la gestion du stress, santé mentale et physique. Je ne serais pas honnête avec vous si je ne vous dirais pas que j'éprouve un peu de stress également devant vous, tous ces gens de tous ces pays, avec toutes vos expériences, près de 300 personnes actuellement en ligne. Et puis la contrainte du temps. Parce que normalement, pour faire ce genre d'atelier cohérence cardiaque, ben voilà, j'ai l'occasion de faire 1h30, 2 heures, voire 1, 2, 4 journées. Bref, ici, on va faire ça en peu de temps. Mais donc, la cohérence cardiaque, je ne sais pas qui a déjà entendu parler de ça. On dit parfois cardio-feedback, bio-feedback aussi. Mais voilà, je commence avec ça. Parce qu'il y a tellement d'approches maintenant pour gérer notre stress, mais c'est quoi la spécificité? Mais j'ai vraiment envie de dire, c'est tout simple d'application. Ça vous demande très peu de temps, seulement 3 fois 6 minutes par jour de petits exercices de pratique va vous procurer un calme, un bien-être et plus de focus. C'est mesurable donc avec du biofeedback. Vous allez le découvrir un petit peu dans un instant. C'est scientifiquement fondé sur des marqueurs de santé. Ça demande très peu de temps d'apprentissage et finalement, tout le but, c'est l'autogestion. On se prend en main soi-même. On a un outil sur soi-même qu'on utilise. Et donc, ça a un impact sur l'ensemble de notre bien-être. Alors, bon, il y a beaucoup d'études qui ont été faites. Là, je me base évidemment sur mon propre expérience et avec mes clientes en individuel, en accompagnement individuel et en groupe. Mais des études démontrent aussi les bienfaits plus larges. Donc ici, il s'agit des personnes, près de 12 000 personnes, qui pratiquent la cohérence cardiaque depuis 6 à 9 semaines. Et vous voyez vraiment des nettes améliorations dans plein de domaines. Donc, une amélioration par rapport au début de 24% en termes de pouvoir se concentrer, focus, meilleure qualité de sommeil, plus calme, plus posé, augmentation de 38%, moins de sentiments d'anxiété, moins de fatigue, et moins de sentiments dépressifs. Donc plus cette capacité de pouvoir relativiser. Alors, voilà, il y a déjà de multiples secteurs où on applique la cohérence cardiaque. Donc, par exemple, l'armée de l'air en France, les pilotes de chasse sont déjà entraînés à la cohérence cardiaque depuis près de 15 ans maintenant, justement, pour pouvoir être très focalisés lors de leur mission. La police aux Pays-Bas, 55 000 policiers aux Pays-Bas sont entraînés à la cohérence cardiaque, justement, pour pouvoir récupérer très vite après une intervention et être prête à affronter les interventions suivantes et être vraiment disposés. Et puis, dans le secteur de la santé, aux États-Unis, oui, en Angleterre, aux Pays-Bas, en Belgique, ici, en France, en Allemagne, le secteur de l'enseignement et bien sûr aussi de plus en plus dans les entreprises. Voilà, bon, comment ça marche cette cohérence cardiaque? C'est quoi? Il faut parler peut-être un tout petit peu des mécanismes de stress. Et alors là, j'ai envie de partir avec vous en voyage, chez nos collègues du Kenya. On est dans les savanes. Et je ne sais pas si vous connaissez le livre « Pourquoi les zèbres n'ont pas d'ulcère ». L'ulcère, c'est cette pathologie très typique, très associée au stress. Eh bien, il est vrai, les zèbres n'ont pas d'ulcère. Alors, est-ce que le zèbre n'a pas de stress? Je pense qu'un zèbre peut avoir énormément de stress aussi, parce que la savane n'est pas sans danger. Il y a des prédateurs, il y a le lion qui guette le zèbre. Le zèbre, tout son corps a déjà senti le danger et il faut produire l'action. Donc, tous les mécanismes de stress se mettent en route. Le cœur va battre plus vite, l'adrénaline se produit, le sang va aller dans les gros muscles parce que le zèbre doit être capable de fuir. Parce qu'entre le combat, la fuite ou se figer, je crois que sa meilleure mode de survie, il le sent bien, c'est bien la fuite. Il prend la fuite, il court, il court, il court. Mettons qu'il arrive tout à fait à se mettre en sécurité, mais il a plein de symptômes. Il y a des douleurs musculaires, une énorme fatigue. Et qu'est-ce qu'il fait, le zèbre? Il trouve un petit peu la brousse et il s'installe, il se repose, il va récupérer en mode sûr et il se repose. Et donc, voilà, il s'agit finalement d'un grand stress, mais temporaire, et il y a un temps de récupération, le temps de reprendre la route par la suite. Alors, je vous invite à réfléchir, est-ce que nous, on prend ce temps de repos après un stress? Parce que de nos jours, nos mécanismes de survie, nos mécanismes de stress fonctionnent tout à fait de la même façon encore. Mais voilà, on n'a plus les mêmes dangers, dans la plupart des cas. Maintenant, c'est notre téléphone qui est tout le temps on, c'est les courriers qui arrivent, c'est les deadlines, on court d'une réunion à l'autre, il y a la performance au travail, la productivité, les règles, la bureaucratie, tout ça, le corps le perçoit comme des dangers. Et donc, le corps se met en action. Le corps produit l'adrénaline, cortisol, etc. On se met en action, on réagit et on agit. Et bien sûr, on a un peu de symptômes. Je ne sais pas pour vous, mais je ne sais pas moi, le mal de nuque, un petit peu les épaules, les tensions, les douleurs musculaires, un peu de ballonnement dans le ventre. Tout ça, c'est là, mais bon, c'est pas grave, on continue. Allez, allez, on met encore un peu plus d'énergie, on continue. Et on peut beaucoup endurer, mais si on ne prend pas le temps nécessaire de repos, ah ben, à un moment donné, hein, on rentre dans le stress chronique et finalement, l'épuisement, voire le burn-out, et voilà, on casse. Et donc, voilà, quelque part, contrairement aux zèbres, ben, on ne prend plus ce temps de repos, de récupération en mode sûr. Et donc, peut-être avant de voir un petit peu comment ça marche, et qu'est-ce qui se passe dans le cerveau? On dit cerveau, mais finalement, hein, nous avons 3 cerveaux. Hein, on a le tout ancien cerveau reptilien, où sont nos modes de survie, hein, toutes les régulations automatiques de notre corps, avec la température, la tension artérielle, tout ce qui est enfin, automatique. Puis, avec les mammifères, a commencé à se greffer sur ce cerveau, notre cerveau mammifère, notre cerveau émotionnel, ou parfois on dit aussi notre cerveau hein, de connexion. Et c'est là où résident nos émotions. Hein, nos émotions, mais aussi où il y a ce petit point rouge qui est notre centre d'angoisse. C'est vraiment l'amygdale, notre centre d'angoisse, qui détecte très vite le danger, que ce soit à l'extérieur de moi ou intérieurement, hein, des agitations intérieures et autres. Et puis à côté, on a le petit noyau jaune qui est le thalamus. Et ça, c'est le chef de gare. Et le chef de gare est là pour envoyer tout ce qu'on perçoit, voit, sent, goûte, mais au bon endroit hein, de notre cerveau humain. Parce que nous avons un cerveau humain, rationnel, qui nous permet voilà, de raisonner, d'avoir une pensée logique, etc. Et qui est là aussi pour dompter un petit peu nos émotions, pour réguler notre comportement social. Mais alors, imaginez-vous, sous stress. Sous stress, qu'est-ce qui se passe? Niveau primaire entre en action. Niveau primaire, ça veut dire système primaire, hein, le cerveau reptilien avec le cerveau émotionnel entre en hyperaction, hyperactivité. Et à ce moment-là, ce fameux chef de gare, le petit noyau jaune, il ne peut plus vraiment envoyer les stimuli au bon endroit du cerveau rationnel. Et notre cerveau rationnel un petit peu mis sur pause. Et bien sûr, c'est très important. Si vous sortez tout à l'heure de l'OMD et vous voulez traverser la rue, il y a un camion qui fonce sur vous, mais très heureusement que votre cerveau rationnel ne va pas penser aux listes de shopping. Hein, vous allez tout de suite, réaction de survie, actionner hein, votre centre d'angoisse, clignote tout rouge et vous sautez en arrière, vous vous mettez en sécurité. Le problème, c'est que ce cerveau se présente aussi chez nous quand on est sous stress continu. Et donc, dans ce cas-là, ben, notre cerveau émotionnel, centre d'angoisse, est en surchauffe continue. Et donc, du coup, notre cerveau rationnel a presque plus d'énergie pour ben, faire ce qu'il doit faire. Réfléchir calmement, avoir une bonne pensée logique, être très focus, concentré. À ce moment-là, ce cerveau, ben, c'est là où on a du mal, on passe deux fois plus de temps à une tâche, on a du mal à se concentrer, voilà, on n'est pas très focus, on devient vite irrité, etc. Alors, est-ce qu'on a le choix? Est-ce qu'on a le choix tout le temps de résider dans ce système primaire, ce système de survie, ou est-ce qu'on peut aussi opter pour le mode sûr, comme fait le zèbre? Ah ben voilà, hein. Bien sûr, nous avons le choix, et le choix est tout littéralement dans notre cœur. la réponse. Parce que le cœur, notre cœur, c'est vraiment notre chef d'orchestre et notre cœur envoie plus de signaux au cerveau que le cerveau n'envoie au cœur. Et donc, tout réside là-dedans. Si on sait dompter notre cœur, la faire cadencer d'une certaine façon, alors qu'est-ce qui se passe dans le cerveau? Et pour faire ça, comment est-ce qu'on peut actionner le cœur? La respiration. J'inspire, c'est l'action. J'expire, c'est le ralentissement. Et alors, si j'arrive à bien balancer tout ça, je peux réussir à balancer mon cœur. Et du coup, mon cœur va communiquer avec mon cerveau. Et pour cela, j'ai à côté de moi Annelle. Je pense que vous avez tous vu des mails d'Annelle dans tout ce processus. Et Annelle, j'aimerais proposer à ce que tu mettes un capteur à l'oreille. Il faut juste faire attention à ce qu'il n'y ait pas de cheveux entre, que la lobe de l'oreille soit bien découverte.
D'accord.
Je ne suis
que
pas
vous
tout
pouvez
à fait
checker?
sûre. Peut-être à l'avance un petit peu chauffer l'oreille pour tout à fait être sûr. Parce que... Alors là, je voudrais, ça c'est toujours le grand moment, un peu de stress pour nous deux. Est-ce que tout va marcher? C'est du biofeedback. Donc, qu'est-ce qui se passe au niveau du niveau de stress d'Annelle? On va voir. Annelle. Voilà. So far, so good. Voilà. Donc, je vais vous présenter un petit écran ici qu'on appelle, bon, peu importe le nom, un tagogramme. Et sur l'axe de gauche, vous voyez donc la fréquence, le rythme cardiaque. Et tout à fait en haut, vous voyez peut-être, bon, en français, FC actuel et moyenne. Alors, Annelle, voilà, hein, elle a pour le moment, son rythme cardiaque change tout le temps. Hein, je vois 90, pardon, 98, 77, 88, 90, 60, etc. Son rythme cardiaque varie. Et heureusement, parce que sinon, ouais, ce ne sera pas à côté de moi, en train de respirer. Alors, Annelle, pour le moment, ben, on voit que oui, ça varie pas mal. Hein, donc, ce cœur accélère, ce cœur décélère, etc. Alors, Annelle, je ne sais pas, est-ce que vous avez mis les calculs?
Oui.
Ah bah, oula, ok. Alors, je vous donne un calcul, 1154, et si vous pouvez déduire chaque fois 17.
Alors,
Ben, assez vite, hein, assez vite. Hein.
17, merci.
Ah oui, oui, oui. Donc 1154 moins 17. Et continuez.
Alors, ah oui, bah là, vous me posez vraiment une colle. Hein, merci.
Il faut dire aussi, Annelle, vous êtes très courageuse parce qu'Annelle est en train littéralement de dévoiler son cœur à vous. Mais écoute, Annelle, voilà, voilà, je vais peut-être déjà, vous voyez déjà des changements sur l'écran. Je vais peut-être maintenant vous proposer, mais évidemment, il faut peut-être que vous regardez alors l'autre écran, Annelle.
Oui.
Et ça, je vais vous le faire pour tout le monde. Hein. Je vais juste afficher un petit métronome. Et tout ce que je vous propose, ben, participez avec nous. Hein, soyez bien assis. On dit toujours sur les esquillons, hein, sur les sit bones, le menton un peu retenu, hein, bien, le dos bien droit. Et alors, je vais proposer de regarder le métronome et aussi, Annelle, évidemment pour vous aussi. Le métronome, c'est la petite boule à gauche. Donc, quand ça descend maintenant, vous expirez et quand ça monte, vous inspirez. On inspire et on expire. Alors, Annelle, ça va un peu mieux. Je vais arrêter la séance. Un petit moment. Voilà. Vous avez pu respirer avec nous, avec Annelle. Ça va, Annelle?
Oui.
On va juste voir un petit peu ce que ça donne. Donc, en fait, ici, sur l'écran, vous avez bien vu, au départ, si j'ai envie de dire, en fait, la petite partie, la première partie que vous voyez, c'est vraiment ce qu'on appelle le chaos cardiaque. C'est vraiment un exemple parfait de chaos cardiaque. Et en temps normal, on est toujours en chaos cardiaque parce qu'on doit tout le temps s'adapter et réagir à ce qui se passe à l'extérieur, à l'intérieur de nous. Et alors, ce chaos, on a encore un peu rajouté à ce chaos quand on a un petit peu mis Annelle sous pression avec les questions de calcul. Et alors là, son cœur s'est envolé, a commencé à battre très vite et encore plus de chaos. Et puis, dans la deuxième séquence, elle commence elle essaye, avec la boule, de synchroniser finalement son cœur sur sa respiration. Et donc, qu'est-ce que ça donne déjà une amplitude plus ample, hein. Ça donne une accélération et un ralentissement du cœur déjà un peu plus égal. Et si je regarde peut-être juste sur cet écran-ci, bon, en bas, à un moment donné, en rouge, on n'est pas du tout en cohérence cardiaque. En orange, on est raisonnablement en cohérence cardiaque, donc en équilibre. En jaune, c'est bon. Et en vert, c'est extra. Et je pense si on avait donné un peu plus de temps à Annelle de se mettre dans le rythme, elle aurait pu vraiment arriver dans le vert. Vous étiez en train de respirer à 6 à 6 respirations par minute. Donc, en fait, c'est un rythme où on respire 6 fois par minute. Donc, 10 secondes pour une respiration. La plupart des gens, ils sont à 12, 15, 20, 30 par minute. Donc, vous vous imaginez un petit peu le chaos cardiaque qu'on peut avoir. Donc, l'idée, c'est vraiment de régulièrement faire un exercice, de faire en sorte à ce que le cœur se synchronise avec cette respiration spécifique et très vite envoie les messages au cerveau qui va se calmer. Donc, voilà pour ce qui est le biofeedback. Et en tout cas, un grand merci à Annelle de bien vouloir avoir voulu exposer votre cœur. Je termine. Oui, peut-être juste par, voilà, un petit peu pour voir la différence. C'est que quand on est en chaos cardiaque, trop souvent et dans la durée, là, on se sent très stressé, on a un rythme cardiaque très chaotique. C'est du coup très difficile de rester concentré, penser à ce qui se passe dans la tête. Ça bloque notre intuition, notre créativité, ça bloque la collaboration, on se sent mal, vite irrité. Tandis que quand on est en synchronisation, quand on produit une onde bien périodique, ample, mais alors on est éveillé, focus, etc. Et voilà ce qui se passe dans la tête. Notre cerveau, à ce moment-là, peuvent vraiment être optimal, collaborer de façon optimale ensemble. Et c'est souvent là où je dis, à un tel moment, on sait prendre des décisions avec cœur et avec raison. Et voilà, et bien sûr, on est aidé par les hormones, il y a encore beaucoup de choses à dire, mais je sais que mon temps est fini. C'est quoi alors la cohérence cardiaque? Définition, c'est souvent plus difficile que juste de le faire. C'est donc un état optimal du corps et de l'esprit au niveau physiologique. Tous nos systèmes vont se synchroniser, physique, on va le sentir, un certain détente dans les muscles, mental, on sera très focus, et émotionnel. On peut mieux relativiser. Et tout cela, ça permet un recentrage, un ressourcement et un renforcement dans tous ces domaines. Tout ce que je vous souhaite, prenez ce temps de repos tous les jours, 3 fois par jour, et vous allez non seulement sentir les effets immédiats, mais aussi dans la durée, et avec tout un impact sur la santé physique et émotionnelle. Et voilà. Et effectivement, j'en profite parce qu'il y a un livre belge qu'avec mon réseau, nous avons édité, Stresser, respirer. Et voilà, c'est le message que j'ai pour la santé mentale et physique. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Melinda. En tout cas, heureusement que ce n'est pas moi qui ai été à la place d'Annelle, parce que sinon, ce diagramme il va fluctuer trop fort. Mais en tout cas, merci beaucoup. Je prends note d'un élément important qui est pour moi très, très nouveau, que c'est le cœur qui envoie beaucoup plus de signaux au cerveau, alors qu'on croyait jusqu'à avant votre intervention l'inverse. Et aussi que c'est aussi simple que ce qu'on l'imagine, parce que lorsqu'on a banalisé peut-être le mot stress et on l'utilise souvent, c'est pour cela qu'on croit que c'est une fatalité. Mais en tout cas, un grand merci. I think now I will give the floor to Ms. Bright to share with us the USCBP experience on how now USCBP is helping their staff on managing their stress, but also taking care about their well-being, health, and mental and physical health. Please, Ms. Bright, floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's my pleasure to be here with you all today. Thank you, Seema Hamid, for your kind introduction. And I'd also like to thank the Secretary General, Dr. Kunio Mikuria, for this opportunity. There's nothing more important to me than the people that make up our workforce. And it's truly an honor to share our best practices with the World Customs Organization and to learn from all of you, including just now learning the great work that my fellow panelist is doing. The WCO's focus in the area of human resources is tremendous, and I'm honored to be included in this new initiative. I hear a lot of discussion about the advancement of technology and automating processes, and I'm a big fan of technology. But behind technology is always our people, and we have to support them. In fact, my top priority is taking care of our people. With over 64,000 employees geographically dispersed throughout the United States and at 48 international locations, our employees face unique pressures, stressors, and emotional demands. And we know that manifests in ways that negatively impact their mental, physical, and emotional well-being, which prevents them from being engaged and performing their best at work. So there is a connection between mental well-being and on-the-job performance. We are making headway, and I'm pleased to share with you what we're doing in the space of stress management and caring for the mental and physical health of our workforce. With that, I want to share a little bit about what we're doing to shape the employee experience at CBP. What I really wanted to impart with this slide is that we're taking a look at the full employee life cycle and the demographics of our workforce to provide them with meaningful resources and services. Resources that make a difference in managing their stress and improving their mental and physical health. What may be a little different is that 80% of our workforce is out in the field, not in the office, carrying out high-risk duties that expose them daily to a multitude of hazards, both physical and mental. They work in long lines at our ports of entry and often in extreme weather. The pandemic aside, they're exposed to all kinds of ailments, and this job can take a toll on your mental and physical health. As head of human resources, I'm charged with ensuring our employees' needs are met, workplace safety and physical health, but also mental health. From day one, when an employee comes on board, they're set up with health benefits and life insurance programs that support them and their families. As part of their academy training, we begin to immediately expose them to mental well-being practices. This is new, but we recognize that we have to start this exposure early on. And as employees advance in their career and become leaders, we build upon that mindfulness training. In fact, I was recently at a leadership course serving as an executive mentor, and during the mindfulness session, the instructor shared a personal story about when he tried to get help with his anxiety and post-traumatic stress. The instructor shared that he was seeing a therapist, and the therapist told him that there's a pill out there, and that pill would help him cope and have a meaningful and productive life. And do you know what that pill was? Meditation. Now, I have to tell you, it's hard for many of our employees not to roll their eyes at the word meditation, let alone to begin incorporating it as part of their daily lives. But this particular instructor came from an intense military background, and with that came credibility. And I think he made the class think long and hard about the benefits of meditation. Incorporating mindfulness training into our academy for law enforcement officers and mandatory training is a recent shift for us, and it's a critical one. Outside of incorporating mental well-being into our training, we also regularly communicate the different services and benefits we provide to our workforce. It cannot be underestimated the importance of communicating your services to the workforce. With most of our workforce working outside of an office, we have to be creative in how we reach them using every single communication channel available. In addition to traditional communication through email and staff meetings, we put information on our public website to reach family members. We use social media. We also mail things to their homes using snail mail, and we use electronic newsletters. We are constantly looking for new ways to reach our workforce because they can't use what they don't know. So what resources are we providing? Could you move to the next slide, please? Something I think is truly unique about CBP is the menu of services we offer our employees. These services set us apart from other organizations similar to us in the United States. For example, we have a child care subsidy program to help offset the cost of child care, and we've established a backup care program, which helps with emergencies when employees need to find and pay for temporary short-term care when regular child care, adult care, elder care, or even pet care services are unavailable. Without those services, our employees are under increased mental stress and also unavailable for working on the job. Our employee assistance program provides services including health and wellness coaching, financial wellness planning, and even legal support services. We found that these are areas that often impact the mental health and wellness of our employees and their families. We also have a peer support and chaplaincy program. This is unique to us, comprised of trained officers and professional staff who support each other as a collateral duty. This cadre of employees are trained to provide confidential peer support to their workforce and their families, and they are acutely aware of the work environment and local environment that our employees are operating in, but they are not professionals. We also have professional on-site clinicians. This is a program we've recently developed and expanded. These are trained professionals that employees get to know because they work with them. They are on site in the workspace. They are available to provide immediate support if there's an incident at a workspace, and they can spot concerning behavior, and employees seek them out knowing that person already and knowing that they're a professional. One other unique program we have is our Veterans Support Program. 30% of CBP's workforce are veterans or former military employees. So it's important for them to be set up for success, and they have unique needs. This program helps them navigate a complicated web of resources provided to them through another U.S. federal agency, and also allows them to connect with each other for peer support. We also have long-term support services through our employee health benefits program, which includes access to long-term mental health care providers. Many countries, as you know, offer healthcare through national health systems, but that doesn't exist for us in the United States. But we are able to provide options to our employees. Each year, employees can choose a different healthcare provider based on their needs. Perhaps one healthcare provider offers a better rate for mental health care services, or another one offers fitness coaching. Employees get to make that choice each year. Now, I've talked a bit about mental health support and not as much about physical and workplace safety, but they're connected. The physical health of our employees begins during the hiring process. For applicants to be hired, they have to pass a medical and physical fitness exam. And during their academy training, they pass another physical fitness exam. So we encourage physical fitness right from the beginning. We also have a physical fitness program, which encourages and allows all employees to spend 3 hours on physical fitness during the work week. Workplace safety is also a major component of caring for the physical and mental health of our workforce. I have safety experts located across the United States working at different locations to support and aid employees with workplace safety. COVID aside, our safety experts support our workforce to counter a number of ailments that they are faced with daily. They work alongside our officers to assess their conditions and what they need to operate in a safe working environment. We then apply those safety practices to similar locations across the country. And of course, it's never done. It is a constant cycle of feedback. In order to really ensure we're providing quality stress management, mental and physical health support to our workforce, we measure ourselves, which we will get into on the next slide. There are a few things we look at when measuring our success and the level of employee engagement. So let me share with you our definition of employee engagement. An employee's sense of purpose that's evident in their display of dedication, persistence, and effort in their work, or overall attachment to their organization and its mission. To achieve a high level of engagement, which we have found to correlate positive to workforce performance and employees staying on the job, we have to ensure we're providing our work for our workforce's whole well-being. We measure some of that through the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, which is a government-wide survey for the United States. So all federal employees receive the survey. With the impact of COVID, our survey began to incorporate a series of questions focused on leadership's commitment to protecting employees' health and safety. However, one challenge with this survey is that it's given to all government employees, so we can't tailor it to our customs and border work. So we found we need to add an additional assessment that digs a little deeper. So we're turning to occupational health assessments. These assessments do take into consideration the unique nature of our mission. They help us to better measure employees' perceptions of their job demands and job resources, while providing insight into areas impacting employee motivation and workplace stress. We're excited to see where this data will take us. And in the offices that have already done this survey, we've seen enhanced leadership communication and employee engagement. In fact, in my other role, in addition to being the Assistant Commissioner for Human Resources, I lead our National Awards Program. The importance of being recognized for contributions to the mission, for being seen, that can't be overestimated. For CBP, a deep part of our culture is also recognizing the sacrifice of employees who paid the ultimate sacrifice. Prior to the pandemic, we might see 1 to 3 line of duty deaths of our employees in a year. As a result of the pandemic, we had 56 line of duty deaths over a 2-year span. We do several things when an employee falls in the line of duty, which, like our work-life services, sets us apart from other organizations in the United States. It also speaks to the commitment we have to our workforce and their families. When an employee dies in the field, there's a lot of stress within that work environment. We have identified dedicated survivor advocates that provide additional support to the families, helping them to navigate the benefits process, which can be lengthy. And our survivor advocates support family members and coworkers who are in deep grief. We also invite family members to our headquarters for an annual Valor Memorial and wreath laying ceremony that not only provides closure to those survivors, but also connectedness to others and pride in our mission. Personally, for me, this level of support and recognition of our employees and our families, it's deeply moving, and it fills me with a tremendous amount of pride. It also makes me want to do more for our workforce. So let's talk about that and go on to the next slide. I mentioned earlier that we'll be traveling across the United States to recognize our employees' contribution through our National Awards Program. Another initiative that brings us to the field is our family outreach events. Prior to the pandemic, we started bringing our services directly to the field via family outreach events, which are highly praised by our employees and leadership. We pick locations where we have a large population of our workforce, and we invite them and their family members to what you might imagine a combined company picnic with an information fair might look like. We bring retirement specialists, healthcare specialists. We provide workshops on financial wellness and parenting, workplace safety specialists. Every service that we provide to an employee and their family, we bring on site to support our family members. These events are really an opportunity to engage our family members directly. As many of you know, at the end of the day, we're often tired and we don't remember our new services that were mentioned at the start of the day, and we forget to tell our loved ones. And in many cases, it is family members who actually take advantage of the program. Many spouses are responsible for making medical appointments. We're identifying resources. And so it's critical for us that we bring information outside of our workforce to their family members who are their support network. Another priority of mine is expanding our occupational safety and health program. We're building out a safety management dashboard by leveraging historical data to identify safety incident trends and status so that we can start to develop predictive models to identify significant risk factors for employees. We're also looking into the use of different wearables, similar to our previous speaker, such as the Fitbit around your wrist, chest straps, and even goggles. We're exploring all sorts of novel technology to reduce stress, improve sleep, and reduce anxiety. There is so much out there, but of course, we all have to be mindful that we're choosing products that meet safety and technology requirements. And the last item I want to touch on is the importance of data or human resources analytics. And I know how important that is to all of you. We are in the infancy stages of capturing different elements around benefits. Another area we are just beginning to measure is the relationship between our work-life resources and programs and outcomes. We have use data, but we really don't know how it impacts substance abuse, well-being, and other types of issues. HR analytics will, like our surveys, tell us how well we are doing and tell us what more we can be doing. With that, I want to again express my appreciation and honor to gather with all of you on what it means to take care of our people. There is no greater asset to any organization than the people in it. They're the heart and the soul, and I applaud WCO's focus in this area so that globally we can continue to grow and support our workforce and our connectedness to each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bright. And I don't know if it's a coincidence that your name is a human and you are dealing with the human resource. And thanks for being a human. And that's really incredible. And this experience is really insightful. And we will be back with you to learn a lot and to share this best practice with other members. I think here I will open the floor as I promised, and I have to take my word. We can take only one question from the floor. If you want to ask a question to one of our panelists or both of them. I will have to look to the chat. Okay, I didn't. Oh. Okay. Concernant l'exploration, je suis preneur. Bonjour. Oh, I didn't see any question, but oh, great presentation. Can please share the slides? No, Andrea, great presentation. Oh, I can see that it's only recognition of this very good true presentation, but I prepared some question. S'il vous plaît, Madame Melinda, est-ce que tout stress est mauvais?
Oui, excellente question. Hein. Est-ce que tout stress est mauvais? Non, certainement. Il y a beaucoup de théories là-dessus, mais quand on a besoin du stress, hein, on a besoin d'un certain stress pour avancer, pour être alerte, pour produire un peu d'adrénaline, parce que l'adrénaline, ça va nous aider à être bien focus. Et c'est vrai qu'on a parfois tendance à parler du stress positif, stress négatif. Moi, j'ai juste envie de dire, le stress tend à devenir négatif si ça se prolonge dans la durée, sans que vraiment on prend ce temps de récupération, de repos, en mode sûr, hein, en safety, en mode sûr. Donc oui, c'est surtout ça que j'ai envie de dire, mais on a tous besoin. Si moi, je n'avais pas eu le petit coup de stress ici en début de séance, je crois que je n'aurais pas pu rentrer dans une espèce de flow, hein, de flux, comme j'ai pu sentir avec vous. Donc voilà, on a besoin d'un peu, mais voilà, pas trop dans la durée. Prenez vos temps de récupération. Okay. Monsieur Mohamed aussi, après toute l'organisation de ce congrès formidable, avec beaucoup de stress.
Ok, merci beaucoup, Melinda. Yeah, oh, we have a question from Algeria. Yes, please.
Merci. J'ai une petite question pour Madame Melinda. Bon, tout d'abord, je vous remercie pour la présentation, excellente. Vous avez tout à l'heure donné l'exemple du zèbre avec une solution de droit, les 4 cycles. Supposons que nous sommes devant une situation qui prolonge dans le repos n'existe pas. Supposons que la première, le danger, après le danger, il y a l'action, les symptômes, repos. Supposons que le cycle, le danger est éternel. Est-ce que la solution est faisable de zèbre?
Alors peut-être d'abord, évidemment, le zèbre, c'est peut-être dans ce cas-là pas le bon exemple, parce que si le lion, il peut courir à l'infini, le zèbre ne pourrait, enfin, c'est pas possible. Mais ce que j'ai envie de dire, Peut-être vous faites allusion aussi au fait que on est tous, actuellement, on est dans un monde, dans un climat fort anxiogène. Il y a énormément de stress, certainement aussi au travail, etc. On est soumis à une espèce de stress continu. Ça, c'est tout à fait. La chose, c'est que si justement on ne prend pas ces petits moments de off, de stop, si on ne les prend pas, à un moment donné, le corps peut pendant très longtemps produire de l'adrénaline, du cortisol, parce que tout ça, ça nous donne de l'énergie pour continuer. Mais du cortisol, à long terme, dans notre corps, ça provoque vraiment des dommages, des damages. Et donc, au final, à un moment donné, on n'a plus de réserve et à un moment donné, on s'épuise. Et à un moment donné, on n'a plus cette énergie et on tombe dans un autre mode qui est vraiment le mode du collapse, hein, ou de l'apathie, peut-être d'abord l'apathie, un peu de cynisme, et puis une espèce de collapse qui peut suivre. Et là, je parle des gens qui sont voilà, qui du jour au lendemain, ils se lèvent, ils veulent se lever pour aller au travail, mais ils sont plus capables. Le corps est épuisé. Donc, c'est les petits moments de stop qui sont importants, même si on est continuellement sollicité, c'est vrai. Mais c'est à nous de devenir attentifs à nos moments de stop. Et justement, des petites pratiques de cohérence cardiaque peuvent vous aider, pour autant que vous trouvez le petit rituel, hein, à insérer dans votre vie journalière pour le faire.
Merci beaucoup, Melinda. Yeah, please, Bangladesh, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. I put the question in the chat box. I think you missed it. It's okay. I can read it out, no problem. My question is to Ms. Bright. Your presentation was excellent. We enjoyed a lot. I have a question. What if a person doesn't get due promotion or superseded? It's a stress for him. How do you handle it as an organization? Thank you.
So generally, in our system, an employee applies for a promotion, and we provide a lot of material beforehand about the promotion exams so that they can prepare for the exams. But if an employee believes that they were unfairly not selected, then there are certain appeal rights that the employee has. It varies a little depending on their situation, but there is a process that they can use to sort of request reconsideration.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bright. Yeah, please, Finland.
Good afternoon to everyone. Stefan Aniszewski from Finnish Customs. Let me thank the panelists for their great presentations, and I would have a comment and a question to Mrs. Bright. You mentioned that 80% of your staff is working on operational positions on the field and doing law enforcement type of work. And in our administration, we have a similar situation. Some of our officers have full police powers and do the sort of hardcore customs law enforcement work. And in the course of their careers, they have to meet certain types of standards, physical standards, to be able to work in those positions. And sometimes we've had issues where the officers actually haven't met the standards, and we've had to rotate them out from those law enforcement positions to some other types of customs works. And that has created a lot of stress for those people who want to work on law enforcement. So we've had to invest a lot in career planning. And I was just wondering whether you have encountered in CBP these types of issues, and have you had cases where you've had to actually create other types of career opportunities for persons who have worked for a long time in law enforcement and unfortunately can't anymore do that type of work because of the physical requirements of the job? Thank you.
Yes, a little. We have developed career path tools that show employees where they can go in the future of their careers. But we also have mandatory retirement for our law enforcement officers that we don't have for non-law enforcement positions. So they actually are eligible to retire earlier than I am, for example, at a lower age. And then there is a mandatory age at which they retire. And often they go into other private sector jobs. Sometimes they retire and no longer work, but they often transition into other types of jobs, perhaps as consultants or other positions. But we don't, I will say, we don't have a requirement for them to meet physical standards. We don't test them once they're already on the job physically.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Bright. I think I'm behind my time, and I have to close this session and to move to panel 5. Thank you very much, Ms. Bright. And you know, if you remember, it was this year on February when you made this comment that WCO should work on that, and now this now happened. Thanks for that. Merci beaucoup, Madame Melinda, pour avoir accepté déjà de partager avec nous cette expérience. Et là, ce n'est que le début de notre collaboration. Merci beaucoup. Et nous passons au panel 5. Merci beaucoup.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Panel 5 will be discussing well-being at work to promote diversity, inclusion, and integrity in the workplace. Workplace well-being relates to all aspects of working life, from the quality and safety of the physical environment to how workers feel about their work, their working environment, the climate at work, and the work organization. An inclusive work setting supports employee well-being through its positive effects on employee self-concept and self-esteem, enhanced career achievements and progression, greater work-life balance, social connectedness and belonging, reduced discrimination, prejudice and harassment, and pro-social behavior. To shed the light on this very important topic, I am delighted to welcome eminent panelists who I thank very much for their participation to this very important event, despite a busy schedule. I am pleased to be able to present Ms. Unur I. Kristiansdottir, who is the Human Resources Director at the Iceland Revenue and Customs. I would also like to welcome Andrea Lemgruber, who is the head of the Fiscal Affairs Department's Revenue Administration 2 Division at the International Monetary Fund. And finally, it is my pleasure to welcome Natalie Wilkins, who is the co-founder and co-CEO of Thriving Talent. Start with Ms. Unur I. Kristiansdottir. Can you tell us what guidelines and tools did you put in place within Iceland Customs and Revenue to support managers in being able to effectively manage their employees in a hybrid work environment, while at the same time supporting their well-being and in ensuring business continuity? And as well, what are the challenges you have encountered and how did you overcome them?
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for the question. Well, at first, when we started working in a hybrid work environment, it was like with many other workplaces, a forced operation because of COVID. When COVID hit us, we had to act fast and rethink the way we were working. It was clear from the beginning that it was not possible to do all projects or jobs from home or remotely. In order to ensure business continuity, we had to look deeply into our work methods and how to be open for business. And this then led to a substantial analysis of our business, our managers made an analysis of which projects could be carried out remotely and which projects and tasks had to be done on site. And to support this, we also conducted a comprehensive competencies analysis of all employees. And this was done so that each shift and each post could be manned with employees who had the right skills and competencies. This methodology has then allowed us to maintain the operation and ensure our business continuity, even though some employees are still not working in their assigned workstations. And now, after COVID, we are still partially working in a hybrid work environment, and that has called for us to set clearer guidelines and tools for our managers to be able to support their employees in this changed environment. One of the things that we have implemented is a hybrid work agreement contract, which sets out the terms for the employees' hybrid work, as well as support rules for managers to be able to better monitor and better manage employees who are not working in the office or on site. A part of the guidelines for managers to be effectively able to manage in this new work environment is a requirement to keep timesheets and project accounts. And where there is a record that's kept over status of tasks and how much time is spent then on each task. And the manager is then again responsible for reviewing the project accounting and monitoring that everything is according to plan. And we do believe that this is a very important thing to ensure our business continuity. Another important aspect for managers is to monitor employee well-being in this new environment. It has been shown that employees have a great need to feel a part of a team and continue to be a part of the workplace. Therefore, we do encourage that regular team meetings are held and people are encouraged to keep in touch despite possible distances between them. And in regards to the challenges that we have encountered, then when we started hybrid work in COVID, it soon became clear that the employees needed to be kept informed and updated on various things in order not to feel alienated working from home. Then the key focus was to keep employees informed and inspired to fight the common challenges during the pandemic. Various rules and restrictions imposed by the government were constantly changing, and they had to be fulfilled and implemented for the organization, and the employees had to be well informed. And this was the role of the HR division, which sent daily emails to all employees. And the emails had to be at the same time brief, clear, informative, but also inspiring and uplifting. And these emails covered the latest in meeting constraints, reminding people of importance of personal hygiene, as well as including general encouragement and reminders to staff to take care of their mental health. Sometimes there was something encouraging in this post, for example, a song or a short story. However, an effort was made to avoid jokes related directly to the COVID-19 pandemic, as the issue was so sensitive. And after COVID, we have realized that there's still a need for belonging and being part of the team, even though you're not in the actual workplace. A need that should not go unrecognized, as that is a big part of employee well-being. And we have tried to meet this challenge with, for example, regular info emails and posts, as mentioned before, and short courses on how to work in a hybrid work environment, as well as training for managers on how to manage their team in this new work environment. And we have staff meetings with all staff scheduled at regular intervals to keep them informed about the key operational activities and highlights, but the main focus is on keeping spirits high. The workplace then does various things to try and enhance employee well-being. We give little gifts at regular intervals, such as sweets and flowers and things like that. And in the summer, the staff gets extra vacation days to rest and recharge the mind for ongoing challenges. And in December, we also give extra vacation days. And we do try and use the technology like Zoom to organize events like bingo and concerts, comedian stand-ups, etc. And all this we do to ensure to keep employee well-being well at mind. And whether we like it or not, the work environment and work methods have changed, and the hybrid work is here to stay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next question will be for Ms. Natalie Wilkins. Ms. Wilkins, in your experience, what are the key ingredients or considerations that organizations need to contemplate in order to drive a successful inclusion and culture agenda?
Thank you, Julie. Well, I wish I had a visual to actually explain this better, but I'll try my best with my hands and my words. So imagine a pyramid shape, and I believe there's 4 ingredients inside this pyramid. And the first starts with leadership, because when you're looking to create a change in culture where you're fostering greater inclusion amongst colleagues, where you're creating a sense of belonging, and also trying to include more people, more representation in your workforce, then it really does start with you, with leadership. And so what does that mean? It's firstly looking at the governance for driving such a culture change. And governance means, who are you going to involve in making decisions around priorities for this change? And how are you going to make sure that different voices are represented inside of that governance, so that really includes everyone? And then once you have some governance structure in place, then what would be the measures that you're wanting to track and report on to know whether you're making an impact in this work? So, for example, targets and measures could be around gender. That tends to be the norm across the world, and that representation of male, female. But as we know, gender identities are much broader than just male, female. And what are you looking to improve in your organization? So really being able to take a snapshot of what's happening today, what does that look like? And then creating your aspirational targets to make a difference is another step around leadership. And once you have those basics in place, then you really need to educate and build awareness and competencies in your leadership on how to lead inclusively. I don't know if this is a term familiar to you all, because it's a very specific type of leadership style, but what we mean by inclusive leadership is being able to apply behaviors such as curiosity. Are you genuinely interested in different people, in what they think, in their perspectives, in their life experience? So how are you curious about others? How are you practicing humility? You know, we talk about technology and transformation. And are you really interested to demonstrate that you're willing to take risks, that you're willing to make mistakes and fail and learn from them? And how are you making that safe for other people to do the same and to do creative work? And another example of a behavior could be perspective taking. We talk about when you have a diverse group, you can really amplify performance in the workplace, but how are you making it safe for people with different opinions and perspectives to share those in their teamwork, and for you to consider them and see what's valuable in those different perspectives? And so inclusive leadership training is often what I see being a fundamental foundation piece to really helping to drive that agenda. And then on top of leadership, I would argue that you would need to invest resources and time looking at your structures. So structures mean processes, HR processes, other types of processes. What are the ways in which you make decisions, and how inclusive and equitable are those structures and systems? And equity is very different to equality. Equity is recognizing that certain groups of people have a different starting point to others because of historic and systemic reasons. And how are you addressing those inequities inside of your systems? And one of the best questions that we train HR and leaders to ask themselves is, who is advantaged or who benefits from this, and who is disadvantaged, and why? And what can you do, even small things, to improve that situation? On top of that, I would say that you have a lot of biases in your systems because of our culture, because of our history. And those biases, those often implicit biases, so they're unconscious, are moving you to make a certain assumption or decision about an individual. and this goes back to inclusive leadership. If you are an inclusive leader, you're working on your self-awareness. What am I biased by? Which groups of people do I treat differently to myself? Or what type of person would I make assumptions about and limit in terms of their possibilities or opportunities at work? And being aware of those factors, but then trying to make sure that in your processes, whether it's recruitment, promotion, talent management, you're really checking that those biases are not present and challenging each other in a safe way if you notice any biases. So, for example, in an interview process, in different countries, and I've noticed in different cultures, the way you write your CV, your resume, will depend on where you grew up and where you started your career and the type of information that's important for employers to see on that CV. I used to work at the Global Fund in Geneva, and it's an international organization, and I was in charge of talent acquisition and talent management. And I noticed that in my team, we'd receive applications from all around the world, but every single CV was different to the other because of where they came from. And because my recruiters at the time were predominantly white Europeans, they would judge those CVs from different parts of the world based on their own preferences and biases. And I was really struggling to get on a short list people represented from different parts of the world because of those biases. So what are the ways you're making decisions and making assumptions about people? And how can you correct that so that it's more equitable for everyone? And then on top of your structures, I would argue, we talked about behavioral, but you know, I heard in the panels yesterday, especially around mindsets and how you need to train and develop mindsets if you're looking for change. And I would argue there's a lot of work that needs to go into building capacity and awareness around our mindset and our attitudes towards others, and how we can be a lot more effective in working with diverse groups. I also argue you need to recruit and promote for mindset. Because if you don't really bring in the DNA you want and promote into leadership the right DNA and attitudes, then you're not going to change the culture. It's just going to be reinforcing itself. And finally, and I heard a lot about this also this morning, this afternoon with the first panel, when you're driving change, it's really important to have feedback loops, to have surveys, collect data, and to be able to see whether what you're doing is having an impact. How are you measuring value around inclusion and belonging? Surveys is definitely one way to do that. But also being able to track how those experiences between your different groups of people in the workforce are different or similar, and then using that feedback to apply different actions, different activities to make things better. And last but not least, I'd really encourage everyone to put both your people and your clients, your customers, to the heart of what you're doing here, because at the end of the day, more and more, we're looking to work with companies and with organizations that we can identify with, that we feel safe with, that understand us. That goes for your people just as much as your customers. And as long as you've really got the human perspective, the human approach to this work, and you're not excluding people on purpose, then you'll definitely have a sustainable agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those insightful comments. We're going to be moving on to our third question for Ms. Andrea Lemgruber. The International Monetary Fund's Diversity and Inclusion Report for 2020-2021 speaks to initiatives that have been implemented to foster a more inclusive and equitable work environment and increase accountability. What are the advantages of good employee health and well-being that you have seen at the IMF as a result of promoting diversity, inclusiveness, and well-being in the workplace?
So thank you, Julie. And let me first thank the WCO for the very kind invitation, and congratulations to C. Mohammed for the organization. Thanks. So going straight to the question, I would say organizations are more effective, credible, and legitimate if they reflect the environment in which they operate. As a global organization with 190 countries serving as being our members, of course, the IMF reaches out to many different countries and people, and they reflect different backgrounds and cultures and different perspectives. So we know to be more effective, credible, legitimate, we need a workforce that really represents our membership. I think like always starts with the membership, right? So because of that, like many people can ask why. And why? Because we do work developing policies with all countries, those country officials. And of course, we want to have an open dialogue with everybody. And we need to understand their needs, because only understanding their needs, we are going to be able to provide good solutions. So as we say, global challenges, global solutions, and we need a global workforce. Yes, what we have been doing, I think, as you mentioned, Julie, through our diverse and inclusion report, I think it became very clear that over the past decade, the fund has identified some areas where we were lagging behind. You just mentioned gender is like one of those that it's clear. So we started working on enhancing gender balance. And also because of the global membership I just spoke about, we have an area that we call underrepresented regions. These are regions where we know we need to enhance the share of employees in our workforce. For example, staff coming from Africa, from the Middle East, some countries in Asia. So we have been working on that. The report shows that we are moving in the right direction. For example, women in leadership, which is an important area. So in 2009, we had only 18% of the senior managers comprised by women. Now it's 31%. So we moved. So we were able to make progress. And similarly for the underrepresented regions, from 20 to 27%. So this is where we are in terms of numbers. But I think like, I'm very glad that you spoke before me because that's exactly what you said. It's not just about numbers, it's about inclusion as well. So we need to make sure that everybody's heard, because it's not just adding more people, it's making sure they are heard and then they can influence the policies, like going back to where I started, right? Because otherwise we cannot help you, our member countries. So inclusion became very important. And we know inclusion is the way the diversity is going to make a difference. So we are working more and more to have all these kind of features and recommendations on how we hear people, how we don't shut people down when they have a different opinion. And for sure you can see, and you know, there are many ways to solve problems, and often like people come from different perspectives. So we needed to hear the different perspectives to make sure the solution is really like a concrete solution, that it's the best solution for the countries. So I think from the HR side, what we notice is that to include people, we need to change, right? Because exactly like to be able to hear them. And it's very hard to do that when everybody is busy, stressed. I think we discussed a lot of this, and the workload is really like up to the sky, right? And I would like to share 2 experiences during the pandemic, how we dealt with that. So generally speaking at the IMF first, and then I will tell about my division. We work specifically with tax and customs administrations. So generally, the pandemic was one of the largest economic crises that ever hit us. So you can imagine that the IMF was, in the middle of the crisis, trying to provide overnight solutions to countries, ideas, provide lending. It was like really like a stressful moment for the countries, for us trying to help the countries. And suddenly our business model collapsed. I think all of you know our business model is packing and taking a plane and traveling to countries. So we needed to provide all the support remotely. We were not prepared to do that, but very quickly we needed to adapt. So this is when technology helps. Yes, it is there to help. At the same time, it generates more stress as well, because suddenly we were 24/7 connected, thinking about problems across the globe and trying to provide solutions from our homes. So this is one example how hard it is. What the IMF did, like, and I could go over and over, but I just selected 3 examples. First of all, allowed international staff or anybody who wanted to go back home to go home. The building was closed in Washington, DC. There was no sense that we would be locked in another country. Most of us, including myself, we are not from the area. So we wanted to go back home because our loved ones were far away. No one knew what was happening, and we wouldn't be able to be productive if we were just isolated in Washington, DC for who knows how long. So that was a very interesting policy. For the first time, everybody went back home. And guess what? Like, we showed that we were able to be productive, working from anywhere in the globe. So that was one. The second was actually to provide flexible work arrangements. So we had like different working hours. And that's very interesting. Why? Because some of our people were, for example, providing help to Asian countries. They were literally in lockdown with their families, but in a different shift. Working from 2 a.m. to, you know, other areas. So we needed to provide officially like arrangements that people could take different schedules. And finally, we provided extra sick leave days, not only for the member, but family members as well. So pretty much like adaptations that we did to keep like the business continuity of the IMF. In my division now, some lessons, and some of you work for us as experts. And what do? We do capacity development in tax and customs administration. So we are there to help you. And who are our staff? It's your staff. The IMF, our division in capacity development, we bring people from tax and customs administrations to the fund, sometimes as a more permanent job, sometimes temporary job, but we are all, or almost all of us, we come from the governments. So we have pretty much 80 people working in tax and customs. It's almost half and half. I think it's 45 in Washington, and the rest they are in our regional centers across the globe. So interesting. What are my lessons learned as a division chief? First of all, and I think someone mentioned that as well, it's not only the employee, it's their families, right? And I will say that why? Because our business is actually to take people from their countries, bring to Washington or anywhere in the world to help other countries. We are moving people from their cultural backgrounds. We are moving people from their families. And so we need to take care. We have responsibility not only for the employee, but the families. So for example, we provide educational allowance and other ways, good like global healthcare, to make sure that everybody is good. Everybody feels well and healthy. So we know that no one can be at 100% if your family members are not well. So that's the first one. The second that I learned during the pandemic that was interesting was the sense of belonging is very important. And we invested, and I invested a lot in communication with my own group because we know everybody's living apart. And somehow I think one of the greatest lessons of the pandemic was to realize that suddenly we could connect to all those who were not in Washington, because suddenly no one was in Washington, or very few of us. So all our people, tax and customs, what we call resident advisors, living in countries or living in different, working in this kind of regional centers in Africa, Asia, Latin America. So we found out they can be part of our weekly meetings, the divisional meetings. Before it was like presential in physical, and they were not invited. Now, suddenly my group became much larger because we included people who we never thought about including because we were working remotely. And one day I got an email from one of them living in Africa, and she told me, Andrea, thank you, because those weekly meetings are my lifeline. I was really like that thing, really, even now I can feel like, because I never thought that someone could feel so isolated, but it's true. She was not from the country. She was living in Africa in the middle of the pandemic without her family. And she said, it's when I see my colleagues, and this is really like something that keeps me alive. And finally, I would say flexibility, empowerment, and trust, because of the hybrid, because of everything we just learned, we needed to trust people, right? We are not like clocking in and clocking out. In our case, like it was always, as I said, an institution that travels a lot, people go away, come back. But when in Washington, we were always 5 days a week there. Now we moved to the 2 days a week mandatory minimum. So we needed to trust people. I think we learned that we can be productive and we can trust them during this exercise. But many more things needed to come to adapt to this new normal. For example, performance evaluation. No, it needs to be outcomes and not presence. So this is a way that trust makes a lot of difference. So I think I would conclude now, and thanks.
Thank you so much for those comments, and to the three of you for this first round of questions. Certainly, we can all hear and relate to that sense of humanity, which is at the core, the need for communication, the theme of flexible work arrangements and training, and just that emotion that is evoked on so many levels, and that we need to keep that in keeping our focus to our people, our most important resources. So let's move on to our second round, and again, Ms. Uniri Christiansdottir, within Iceland customs and revenue, how do well-being and workforce inclusion policies contribute to the promotion of integrity and the fight against corruption?
Yes, thank you, Julie. Well, I genuinely believe that diversity, well-being, and inclusion are fundamental values that every workplace should be aspiring towards. Diversity of experiences and perspectives adds to the richness of every conversation and dialogue. It therefore gives us a greater opportunity to do excellent work and adds to the ingenuity in the work methods. And at the same time, it helps us to see things in a clearer focus and sheds a light on important topics such as integrity and the fight against corruption. Within Iceland Customs and Revenue, we have a few well-being and inclusion policies. We do work in accordance with the equality law in Iceland, and that means implementing and working according to various policies which focus on topics such as equality, inclusiveness, and well-being. Various metrics have been set to monitor progress of our policies, and these statistics helps us monitor the situation, and by comparing the measures over time, allows our managers to react and make corrections based on equality considerations. Firstly, I would like to tell you about our human resource policy. Our human resources policy focuses on these things: inclusiveness, mutual trust, cooperation, consideration, and respect between everyone within the organization. Human resources are a key part of the organization's effectiveness in providing excellent services in the field of taxes and customs, customs enforcement, and collection. In order to achieve that, we strive towards a good working environment where our employees form a strong team that is aware of the value of their work, builds on strengths, and creates an environment where improvements and cooperation is maintained. The organization is responsible for the welfare, the well-being, and the health of the employees, as well as equality and equal opportunities. Then we have an equality policy, and the main objective of the equality policy is to establish and maintain equality and equal opportunities for all employees within the workplace, with a focus on diversity and inclusion. And the policy covers all activities and all employees of the workplace. There are 6 goals within the policy. The first one is to maintain gender balance within the workforce. Equality considerations must be taken into account with other criteria when recruiting new hires. We are aiming for an equal ratio of genders within the same job categories. And the second goal is equal pay, the same salary paid for jobs of equal value. And the third goal is career advancement, ensuring equality and career progression. Fourth goal, training and development. All employees have equal access to continuing education and vocational training. Fifth goal is balancing work life and private life, to enable employees to balance work and private life with a focus on both well-being at work and also at home. And our sixth goal is the prevention of bullying and harassment, increasing awareness of the harmful effects of bullying and harassment in the workplace. Social support is a key theme in the context of well-being and, for example, burnout. Knowing that one does belong, is respected and cared for is important for the individual employee. And the most important thing is that a person knows that he or she will receive support and help if needed. Asking for support can be difficult, especially in the workplace, and that may include one or more of the following: fear of not being accepted, fear of being betrayed after revealing his or her feelings, fear of being reprimanded, and fear of being misunderstood. Here again, individual differences have to be considered. The main thing is the person's own perception or feeling of having access to social support or being able to give social support to others. I would also like to mention the equal pay standard. To fulfill the requirements of the equal pay standard, Iceland Customs and Revenue had to define and document an equal pay system, as well as an equal pay strategy and the before mentioned equality policy. And part of the process of the equal pay standard is to conduct regular and systematic pay analysis, which we do conduct twice a year. Doing so should over time eliminate the unexplained gender pay gap as the rules become clearer and the system more transparent. We are proud to inform that the pay gap within Iceland Customs and Revenue has decreased significantly over the time we have had the equal pay standard in place. A lot of work has been done to equalize pay. And this year, the pay gap is less than 1%. To be specific, the pay analysis show a 0.9 salary difference where men were higher. But in 2021, the wage difference of a comparable measurement was 4.7%, where men were higher. So we are making good progress. And lastly, I would like to tell you about our gender balance panel pledge. And this pledge is a vow to commit and increase gender balance in forums. It's a statement that a panelist is not willing to participate in a panel or debate unless there's an equal gender participation. Using a panel pledge can ensure that there's a conversation each time a panel is composed, and the process of including female experts will eventually become the norm. Well, we do not have an equal gender participation here on this panel, but we let that slide. You might ask why we believe that these issues are so very important. But the reason is that we believe that focusing on these aspects in how we manage our human resources, we contribute to increased integrity among our employees. And the basic principle with the implementation of our policies regarding well-being and workforce inclusion is to increase fairness in the workplace. So that all our employees experience equality and honesty. We believe that an honest and trustworthy workplace leads to higher integrity among our employees. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those comments and for sharing what you're doing in your organization. Moving on to our next question for Natalie. How do you measure or quantify organizational success in terms of well-being, diversity, and inclusiveness in the workplace? And are these now becoming a standard requirement throughout private and public industry and attracting new talent?
Thank you, Julie. I think before I maybe explain the how, we need to remember that the what is as important and often has to come before the how. So if you are thinking of developing a strategy or improving a strategy around diversity, equity, and inclusion, I would highly encourage you in this leadership piece, when you're thinking about your governance, to get clear about what your measures of success are for your particular organization. What does that mean? It means not only looking at data to identify where you are now around the topics that are important to you, but where do you want to be in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years' time? And really being able to visualize that and have a vision to formulate your goals, your success criteria is important before we get into the how. And as the old adage goes, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So it's really important to be realistic and aspirational about the elements that you want to measure. So once you've been clear about what you want to have as a success, then it goes back to what you've probably heard in other panels. It's a mix of quantitative and qualitative data. So for example, if you have an aspiration to have gender balance across all levels in your organization, then you need to be able to track that. That's an easy quantitative measure to track. But then what are some other interesting questions you could be asking your data? And I would say, don't just track and report on outcomes, but track and report on inputs. What are the things that you have control over that would change this outcome? So if you do want 50-50, then look at the obvious processes such as recruitment, promotion, performance management, but there might be other things too. So for example, when you're looking at recruitment, having a KPI or some data point around how many people are you shortlisting and what's the gender balance, for example, amongst the shortlist? Is it equal? And then when you start to compare that shortlist to the number of applicants that you found within the gender dimension, is the actual conversion the same for men as it is for women? If it's not, then get curious and ask, well, what's happening in that shortlisting process? That means that less of this type of group are getting shortlisted over the other. So having those types of data points will be interesting for you to be able to understand whether you're moving in the same direction towards success or not. Then other dimensions and that you might want to be looking at within your data, for example, is if you're trying to understand what might be inhibiting gender balance, for example, then look at other data points like sickness rates, absence rates. What is it that's perhaps slowing certain groups of people down to advance in their career over others? And look at different life stages too, because often there's a lot of research that shows that parenthood, for example, is a life stage that affects certain groups over others more. And what is it that's getting in the way for that particular group to be able to continue advancing or growing in their career because of that life situation? So really trying to understand what's happening on a quantitative basis. And then the more sophisticated you are inside of your strategy and the way that you're advancing on this topic, you might start wanting to track how the work that you're doing is correlating with rates of innovation, the problems that you're trying to solve in your organization, I think it's a very interesting area to start to see how there might be an influence when you start to really embrace diversity and encourage inclusion. How is that having an impact in different projects and strategic areas of your organization? And not only will this show you where there might be some issues that you need to pay attention to, but also it's a great way to demonstrate value on this topic. You know, it's often in the conversations I have with clients, it's a soft topic. They describe it as a soft topic, but I think you can really be smart about how you make it a hard topic, a topic that you can quantify and show measurable outcomes. Now, once you've looked at your quantitative, you want your qualitative. And we heard about surveys. I think surveys are a fantastic tool, and many survey providers out there are improving the way that they can capture data, but not only capture it, but measure it. And I would encourage you to be using survey tools which have machine learning, AI, that are able to read and scan thousands of open text comments and very quickly classify into positive or negative statements, and even group them into categories or topic areas that might be concerning you, so that you're really able to leverage the qualitative, the open text feedback that your people are giving you, and how that experience is different from one group to another. So don't just stop with the rating scale and the open text questions, but also ask for anonymous demographic information, especially if in your country there's maybe some legalities about what you can be capturing and tracking about people. Make it anonymous. Have them self-declare which different identity groups they belong to, and then start to compare what the results of those surveys are between one group and another, because it's then really insightful to see that not everyone is feeling included. If you just take the measure of the group that you've surveyed, and if there is a dominant group within your workforce, then you will be blind to the experiences of people who identify as different to the majority. And you really need to be able to unpack and compare that feedback. And then if you haven't already started investing in your people analytics, please make that a top priority going forward. It's the future. It's a way that HR can really demonstrate value in the organization, and really have a seat with the leadership to prove the way that you're managing your human resources can have a difference, can create value. And to the second part of your question, Julie, around, you know, how is this becoming a standard requirement throughout private and public industry in attracting new talent? I think for me, this goes back to what I said at the beginning, you know, what are your measures of success? And from the conversations I had throughout the day yesterday with different panelists and members here, delegates here, we really need to be thinking about the future, because the next generation are looking for different things to what I was, to what you were when you were starting out your career. They measure success in such a different way to the way that we probably measure success. And they're asking which employer is going to help them create that value, which employer is going to give them what they're looking for. And there's a really great study that Deloitte runs every year, a global study for many years now, on what millennials and Gen Z are looking for in an employer. And the feedback has been pretty much the same for the last few years. The latest report, and it narrows down the top factors in choosing or staying with an employer, is of course higher compensation, because the costs of living are rising, and you know, young people want to be able to be independent and live independently. But second to that is more flexibility and better work-life balance. Many of the younger generation don't want to work 12, 14, 16-hour work days. They want to have a life. They want to enjoy their family, their friends. They have other interests outside of work. So how is the employer respecting people's private lives and time for that? They want increased learning and development opportunities. they're looking to grow just like we were. So that's not changing. And they're looking for better mental health and wellness support, as we heard earlier. This is going to be such an important factor for the next generation. How are we equipping them to remain resilient and healthy so that they can continue performing? And all of the data analytics that you might be thinking of creating, I believe should be looking at those factors, helping you measure those factors so that you can demonstrate why they should come and work for you. The competition is going to get harder and harder to attract top talent into organizations. So you need to be ready for that, and you need to be offering a workplace that they would love to work for. So thank you for the question, and I hope that gives you some ideas.
Thank you so much for the response. Moving on to our last question. For Andrea, as part of the assessment missions conducted by the IMF, have you seen a positive correlation in terms of revenue collection and trade facilitation at the level of customs administrations that have applied a well-being strategy together with a diverse and inclusive workforce? And if so, what are the main lessons learned from these experiences?
So thanks a lot, Julie. So our capacity development work aims at helping customs administrations strengthen the capacity to do your job. And we know that this is really like a medium to long-term transformational process. Like no one changes overnight. It takes time. And for this transformational process, we know it requires innovation, strategic vision, and also the ability to lead and implement reform. And in our work, we know it's where it's, I think, tougher. It's to implement. No, it's when like things not happen in practice, resistance is there, and priorities change, and we don't do in the end what we aimed to do before. So when we talk about customs now, we know you are transitioning from this more traditional agencies, very focused on enforcement and physical inspection. Many countries is still like stopping more than 50% of goods in the red channel. And we want to bring to a more high-tech, smart agency that uses lots of risk management and post-clearance audits. We know like our model, what we want to be, but the transformational process that I was talking about, it's what is difficult, right? And doing this in real life, it's really hard. So we know we need like leadership and ownership of the process, right? And this is where, as I was preparing and thinking, I think diversity and inclusiveness helps. Why? Because typically it's the resistance that we face in the transformational process that stops us, or like aligning stakeholders is very difficult. If we think about, if we can have new people, different groups that can support the innovation, support the transformational process, this can facilitate this job. And I was thinking about two groups that are important for customs: women, the gender aspect, and actually the new generations. Why? Because I think they would benefit from, it's a win-win situation. They would benefit from the new technologies, especially because like the new technologies like scanners and AI and other areas can help, for example, can facilitate women to work in areas that they were not given access before. We were talking about a lot of areas still requiring physical force to be there. And the new generations as well, that they are so much more ingrained into the new technologies that actually it's the data analysis and the artificial intelligence, all the things that we are doing now in customs that are more appealing to these generations. So if we think about that, and we incorporate this diversity into customs administrations, they will help the transformation and they will ask for new waves of transformation. So this can be a very powerful tool. So this is like how diversity can really like benefit the transformation process of the business. So I thought about maybe what, four issues that could be interesting from as lessons learned, as you asked, Julie. So how can we do that? Adopt equity programs to recruit employees with, of course, like we are talking people with equal competency levels, but from these different targeted groups, no, like more new generation, more women who can bring this. And of course, it's not, again, just repeating myself, I guess, not just a matter of numbers, including them in the decision-making process and actually helping them reach to the leadership levels. We are talking about leadership here. It is important. And so we needed to have different styles of leadership. You mentioned inclusive leadership. So it's not only bringing new people, giving their voices, and over time with training and coaching, very important, making them raise in the institutions. Then implement formal arrangements to help staff with special needs. And what do I mean? Like, if we are incorporating new people, I'm just going back, like new generations, they have different needs, as you just said. So let's try to be formalize arrangements where they can benefit. So flexible working arrangements can be one, or, you know, someone who wants to change the shift, to change location. So be more flexible, because women and other generations, they can have different needs. I will give two examples. I asked my people, oh, you know, like, do you have any examples? So our resident advisor in the Caribbean told me, for example, St. Vincent and Grenadines, they have free childcare in the customs house. You know, it seems like simple, but it's nice. Like, you have there, like, you allow women to be there. And Turks and Caicos Islands also, they have this policy, a more formal arrangement where people can apply for a different work arrangement. And we say, oh, but sometimes the informal arrangement is there. Yes, it's true, but we don't know how informal arrangements are done. Sometimes it's just to benefit some people and not other people. So very important to be formal. Then I just mentioned create an environment to allow women and other peoples to go to remote locations to do a work that before was more like closed to new groups. I think with technology can be our ally there. I think it's important. And finally, role model of customs administrations. And I think this is something we want to work more with you from the IMF side, because we know how important and how powerful customs agencies are, administrations are. We are the role model for the whole trade community, the logistics chain. So one issue that it's very important is to pay attention to women in trade, and especially women dealing with small scale trade, many fragile borders. We know, like, even criminal organizations, they use women to carry drugs, arms, illegal substances. So, you know, like, are we paying attention to that? Or just to the big businesses, no? So maybe there is a role that we can play together to help and identify when, like, women are being used in these circumstances, and really, like, help. This is like safety, security to our trade, and actually a gender policy. So there are many areas that when we think about through different lenses, we know that we can benefit more. So just to conclude, like, I think from our side, the IMF, we are seeing all these trends. We are working, for example, with the WCO gender tool to apply to some countries and regions. Actually, we just concluded a study for the Central American Customs Administrations using the WCO tool and with the support of WCO colleagues. So we are happy to do that. And I would say that even though so far we never stopped to have and to prepare a study about the impact on or the results on customs of the diversity and inclusion initiatives, the examples I mentioned, it's what we can gather at this point. And I would say that so far we can see positive results to strengthen customs roles. And I'm talking about the revenue collection, the trade facilitation, security, when we add diversity. And especially we can see where we have more diversity, we can see an open dialogue with the trade community. We can see the adoption of new technologies and much better coordination across the border agencies. So with that, I would say that for us, in the IMF, it's really like important to work with all of you, the WCO, in these trends. And I think like it's actually just by breaking these traditional patterns that we can embrace modernization of our institutions. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And thank you to these three panelists, Yunus, Natalie, and Andrea, for your insightful information, for sharing your expertise, best practices, stories, and lessons learned. We greatly appreciate it. Over to you, Si Mohammed.
I will join my voice to Julie's voice to thanks again this wonderful three females who are giving us, like, I think, a strong signal on what should be the direction in the future in this area. Thank you so much. And we call now the three panelists for the final panel. Thank you so much. Now let's start.
Yeah, this is the one.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Said Ali Kwan. I'm the Human Resources Officer at the World Customs Organization, and it's my pleasure to host the final panel this afternoon. With me, I have a distinguished panel, and we'll be going in right away. Our theme for the final panel is embedding well-being in our employee value proposition. More than ever, custom administrations worldwide are now required to radically rethink traditional assumptions about work, workplaces, and roles. Consequently, the employee experience and value proposition needs to be at the center of their priority and needs to especially focus on matters related to digitalization, personalization, and humanization. We've witnessed a shift from the human resources paradigm to a human resources management model. And this has been done through creating attractive employee value propositions, through pledging to the health and welfare of our employees, and by leveraging new readily available technologies, as has already been shared. Employee value proposition can be defined as an ecosystem of support, recognition, and values that an employer provides to employees to achieve their highest potential at work. It is part of an employer's branding strategy that represents everything of value that the employer has to offer to its employees. Items such as pay, benefits, and career development have already been mentioned, but employers also highlight offerings that are currently in demand. Technology, the hybrid that we've talked about, remote work, and flexible scheduling. Indeed, there is a growing demand from employees that the organization enhances their services in the area of staff well-being through the provision, among other things, a safer and more pleasant work environment, further psychological services in times of crisis. So it's my distinct honor to discuss the topic on embedding well-being in our employee value proposition with a panel composed of eminent speakers. Our earlier speaker mentioned that you need a bit of stress in such sessions. So I hope I have the right balance of stress this afternoon. With me, I have my panelists, and I would like to start with the ladies. Ms. Claire Monari, who's a manager, people and organization consulting with PwC Geneva. You're most welcome, Claire. And on next, I have Mr. Eric Kick, who's the capacity building director at the International Standard Organization, ISO. You're most welcome, Mr. Kick. And finally, I have Mr. Hans Peters, who's the head of administration and personnel, chief of staff at the World Customs Organization. You're welcome, Mr. Peters. All right, we've got our panelists ready and we will try and use the time effectively. I'll start with Ms. Claire. Ms. Claire, leaders and human capital management practitioners had been grandly impacted by COVID-19, as has been mentioned, which has generated significant challenges, but also opened the doors for real opportunities to reimagine and rethink human resource management within their organizations while positioning human capital at the center. So based on your experience with many private and public organizations, could you share with us some of the international trends of the EVP? And as a follow-up question, what are some of the actionable recommendations to sustainably embed staff well-being as an integral and critical part of the organization culture? Thank you.
Thank you for your introduction. Thanks for everyone in the room and online and to the fellow panelists. So EVP, well-being and concrete recommendations asked to the consultants. I guess today I won't break the news by saying that people sometimes struggle and suffer at work, that we hear a lot of buzzwords such as work-life balance, resilience, stress, people-centric, employee value proposition, and I'll stop here. I would like to start also by saying that well-being is a little bit like the Yeti. Everyone talks about it, but no one has really seen it. And there are many definitions flying around. I would like to build on the definition from the World Health Organization. I'm going to quote. It's a state in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Now, I would like to focus on the normal stresses of life. And it's important to note that those normal stresses of life mean something different for different people. And we've heard in the last couple of days a huge diversity, whether you come from from a certain country, work for a certain organization, your personal circumstances, and more. So well-being, the trick to really understand well-being for organizations is to capture the diversity of what it means for different people in different contexts. And I think in the customs organization as a whole, it really applies. I could see that there was a huge variety of contexts, whether you work in the US, in Peru, or in different countries. Now I see that you're asking for concrete recommendations. So I would like to, as many people have before me, stress that well-being is deeply rooted in leadership and the organizational culture. I think the point has been made a few times. So it's not a short-term fix, right? It's not, there is no magic solution. It's a long-term project that needs to be evolutive by nature. So here are the few things I've seen as a consultant working for different types of organizations that could spark some thoughts or ideas. So starting with the how, because that's how we structure it. So the how and then the what. So starting with the how, first piece of important advice is before you open up the well-being box and you actually start asking your people what's going on and you start listening, you need to be fairly confident that you will be able to act off the back of it. This is part of the basic, change management, alignment of leadership. Because if you do open this box and you don't feel ready to embark into any change, then you're only going to make this worse. So make sure that you're ready to act and to undertake change. Then second, as I said before, understand the needs and preferences of your people through a dialogue. So we know there are many ways of capturing what people feel, what they need, but this needs to be a two-way dialogue. And there is often a gap of perception between what employers think employees need and what they actually need in reality. So what is it? Is it reward? We've discussed it. Other panelists have mentioned it. Is it reward? Is it workplaces? Is it flexibility? Is it ways of working? Is it career development? So basically the needs and preferences of your people need to be deeply understood in their diversity. And this is fundamental in order to provide a response that is both tailored to everyone in the diversity of your workforce and flexible. Third point about the how, and also the point has been made multiple times, there are multiple dimensions in well-being, and it has to be understood from a holistic point of view and include many dimensions. So I will tell you about some of those well-being interventions that I've seen very quickly at individual, collective, and then organizational level. And this is when the magic happens, right? So this is different levels. Looking at emotional well-being, you can see that a lot of forward-thinking organizations are now taking action to destigmatize mental health in the workplace. And they also commit to supporting people in very concrete ways. There is now a space. I've heard before in the last few days, it's okay not to be okay. And this is something that we've seen, in multiple organizations and across sectors. Now, looking at physical wellness, another example of what could be done easily and implemented, although with a certain tailoring to people's working environment, is a habit bank, right? So what is your current day made of? What is difficult throughout your day? And how physically can you prevent for those states to happen? So, habit banks, we have done that at PwC. It's called the Be Well, Work Well habit bank. So And it's actually quite powerful when it starts to get embedded at individual, team, and then organizational level. Some examples include, I mean, for us, of course, we work on laptops and sat all day. Might not be the case for everyone, but for us, some of these habits might include, you know, standing up for short meetings, going for a walk when you take some more informal meetings. And it sounds really silly, but when everyone starts building those habits and those behaviors, then they become a bit of a pattern and everyone starts adopting them. And that becomes really powerful and healthy. That, you know, tracking how many breaks you take in the day, or have you had a glass of water, or this kind of nudges as well. And then the third dimension of well-being, and there are many, and I will be brief to finish responding to this question, is about community and purpose. And I think this is one of the key values that we hear from the younger generations as well, and what they expect from work. And so connected to community and purpose, some employers offer volunteering programs, for example, to basically take more of a role in their communities. And we also see a lot of organizations creating a space to basically discuss and exchange about debates of the moment, because they feel like this responds to a real need. So here is a few examples, a bit of the what, a bit of the how, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Claire, on sharing some of these. What I take note of is the habit bank. I've had quite a lot of different expressions, but that's a new one. And I'll be curious before the next question when I ask how long it takes to form that habit. They say a habit takes 21 days, so I'm very curious to see how long it takes to implement that. I'll come back to you, but you can answer before.
I'll prepare my question. I'll get back to you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for that. I'll now move to Mr. Eric. And with the International Standards Organizations, you've published the ISO Human Resource Management Employee Engagement Guidelines, and it speaks to employee individual experience at work, that it can be correlated with sustainable performance and is critical to the success of any organization and the well-being of people and the workplace. So from your experience, how has the ISO Secretariat approached and embedded staff well-being in your day-to-day business as part of your EVP? Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Saidi. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. The WCO and the Capacity Building Directorate was my home, my professional home, I should say, for 5 years. And it's an absolute privilege to join you for this very timely global conference. And thanks to the Capacity Building Directorate, and in particular, Si Mohammed, for the invitation to join you for this conference. Now, many of you will be familiar with a quote, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And what this means is that no matter how well designed your strategic plan is or the new technology that you have, at the end of the day, it will fall flat unless your team shares the right culture. At the end of the day, the people who implement your plan matter. Unless they understand where you're driving, unless they have buy-in, they will not put much effort into executing your strategy. According to another Swiss-based organization, the World Economic Forum, the building of a more resilient workforce requires employers to prioritize well-being. The WEF also advocates that organizations should treat well-being as a tangible skill, a critical business input, if you will, and also as a measurable outcome. Well-being is not a vague or a fuzzy concept. Forward-thinking organizations embrace well-being as a set of learnable actions. Going back to your question, Mr. Moderator, the standard that was developed and released earlier this year is a new ISO standard. It was developed by our Technical Committee on Human Resource Management, and this committee consists of technical experts from around the world who share their knowledge and expertise to develop strategic human resource standards It has also worked on standards on knowledge management and human capital reporting. Now, the focus of the standard that you mentioned is on fostering, on the one hand, the good of employees, but also the good of the organization. In other words, mutual gains through collaboration. And this concept of mutual gains through collaboration is connected to the United Nations Sustainable Goal number 8 on decent work, as it supports sustainable performance as well as well-being in the workplace. What I would like to do is to just very briefly share with you insight into this standard, but also to your question to share with you how we apply these at the ISO Central Secretariat in Geneva. You have to practice what you preach. So going back to my earlier, a quote, the two elements that I will focus on that's embedded in the standard, on the one hand, cultural and values, and some of the speakers touched on this in the previous panel as well. And then secondly, on some very basic practical well-being management practices. Now, according to the ISO standard, the culture and the values of an organization have a significant impact on both the performance of the organization as well as the well-being of staff. Employees want to have an understanding of organizational culture. They also want to have the opportunity to influence what the organization's values are. So workplace culture and values are important, also when you look at the facts. According to a study recently undertaken by the University of Columbia in the United States, organizations with a poor culture have a 48.4% chance of turnover of people. Those with a strong culture, 13.9%. It's a big difference. So feeling connected to and identifying with an organization's values do not only contribute to a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging, but also to the well-being of employees. Values set the tone for culture, and this in turn is an important component of workforce mental health. Now, looking at value and culture, this is where, as customs administrations, you have a significant advantage. Customs has a very clear mission in many parts of the world, whether it's to protect our societies from dangerous goods, unsafe goods, or to help our economies to grow and to thrive. So, we may not have some of the other issues that we're looking at always in terms of compensation, but certainly this value that customs brings is value proposition, if you will, is very powerful, both to attract, people into the workforce, but also to retain people who have a sense of mission. And I last wore a customs uniform, I think it's about 7 years ago, and I can still remember, the pride that I always felt when, putting on my uniform in the morning. Now, back to some of the practices that we have at the ISO Central Secretariat. A few years ago, we decided to revisit our organizational values. And we had a series of very small workshops. We would really try to be inclusive, not just have the usual suspects who would like to contribute and participate, but really making an effort to reach out to all staff. We also decided to bring in an outside expert to facilitate these workshops. And this is really important. It helped to secure buy-in on the one hand, but also to avoid bias on our side. And what the facilitator did was to start off by asking all of us to imagine and to describe, what do we think and what do we would like the ideal work environment to be like for us? Those interactions that we have with our boss, with our peers, with our colleagues, with, outside organizations, with stakeholders that we deal with. In other words, we deliberately didn't start by asking everybody, look, what are the values that you want? We didn't say, are you happy with excellence? Should it be integrity? What about professionalism? So we really started with a visualization exercise. We really shared with each other, what do we want our workplace to be like? And through that, we tried to get alignment between people and between the different teams. Only once we had that, shared a visualization, of what we'd like the workplace to be like. Then we started looking at what do we call these? What are the expressions, around this? So we first had this mental picture of what we want our workspace and well-being in the workplace to look like before the labels. So in our own exercise, and obviously it's different, from organization to organization, what's maybe now the one for the ISO Central Secretariat will change, in 5 years' time. But the 5 values that we ended up with were respect, integrity, collaboration, growth mindset, and the 5th one, pushing boundaries. For each of these, we have a description. So we unpack them, what do they mean? So they're not just slogans that we put in the entrance, but they also have meaning and descriptions attached to them. Now, pushing boundaries was for me a very interesting one. So pushing boundaries for us means, we want to be fearless. We want to be open to change. We want to be open to debate and willing to experiment. And very importantly, and this is something that came through the workshops, we want to be in a workplace where, we are encouraged to take risks and make mistakes. And these things happen because, we believe you can't be fearless, if people feel, but hang on, if I take a chance, if I take a risk, there's going to be, some repercussions. So we wanted to send that message around this. The last point that I wanted to make is that also this values exercise that we went through, we also use it in other ways as well. And this is the second element, after culture and values that I want to share with you, just some very basic management practices that we use. And that is, we wanted to connect our values with performance and the behaviors that we wanted to see in the workplace. So one of the very sort of basic changes that we made is we introduced the concept of check-ins. So every 2 weeks, we have to have bi-weekly check-ins, and these are very much connected to promoting well-being in the workplace. So every 2 weeks for everybody in the Central Secretariat, we're a group of 160 people. We've got bi-weekly check-ins. They are conversations with your direct manager. It's enabled by technology. So you book the check-in system through your online system. So don't just leave it to the discretion of managers and to staff. It is actually online. You have to book it. It's for a maximum of 30 minutes, not 40 minutes, not an hour, but 30 minutes. And there are 7 questions, and it's built into our online platform, 7 questions that you have to complete before the check-in that you have with your manager, and then that you review with your manager. And they are, what are you currently working on? Not an essay, but a set of bullet points on the key priorities in your inbox. Are there any obstacles impeding your progress? What could your manager do differently to support you better? The 4th one, is there anything that you would like to get feedback on? Would you like to ask anyone for a snapshot? So we also have a system of what we call performance snapshots. So where you work with colleagues 4 times every 6 months, you have to ask a colleague that you worked on a task for a snapshot. And that's a whole other story. I won't go into the detail of the snapshots and some of our experiences that we had around there. I realized that people are very nice to each other when we do the snapshots, and you have to do quite a bit of training to give very honest and constructive feedback, but that's for another day. The 6th question is, how do you feel at work? Do you have any work-life issues? And then finally, do you have any impact from COVID? So I guess we're going to start phasing the 7th question out, and we remain with 6. But you can see it's a little bit of a blend, and it's not really about, what are you doing today? It's not activity or task driven. It's really an approach that we introduced to make sure that managers can take a regular pulse of how every staff member in the organization is doing. It happens every 2nd week. And as I said, it's not a conversation about tasks and priorities, but really to get a sense of how our staff members are doing, including as I said, on work-life balance. This is a very simple but powerful tactic that both measures and promotes well-being of our workforce. And these simple check-in questions really help you to understand what is important to your team members, what fears and concerns do they have at that moment in time, and more importantly, what do they need from us as managers to support them, to help them to perform. And these simple questions also help the organization then to identify well-being support actions that are based on the actual needs of our people. I'm going to pause there. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you so much, Mr. Eric. That was very interesting, and I like the quote again. We get to hear it in the MBA class, Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast. And many of us focus on the strategy. I think we all have participated in strategic meetings, but how many of us have participated in culture meetings to set the culture of your organization? Because like Mr. Eric says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I think we need to think the other way around, and thank you for sharing these experiences. Okay, so we move on to the third panelist, to Mr. Hans. Undoubtedly, we entered into a new era of work that will require innovative people management and leadership. This era where more trust and more results are mandatory, a new working environment that requires more autonomy and self-responsibility will also require people-centric workplaces that pay strong attention to staff well-being and adaptability to employee circumstances and preferences. Please share with us what the World Customs Organization is doing to transform the organization's employee value proposition in order to boost employee well-being. Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi. And first of all, let me say it's good to see that some things never change. And a presentation from Eric was always inspiring in the crowd, and you were always a guarantee for good quotes. And I see that's still the case today. However, today we are talking about change. Unfortunately, fortunately, organizations do change, and the WCO is no exception to that. I've heard many exchanges over the past 2 days, people referring to experiences during the pandemic, seeing how teleworking actually worked for people, and we have obviously a similar experience. So we are formalizing a more permanent teleworking arrangement that will offer staff whose jobs allow it, of course. So my apologies to the technician in the booth up there. The possibility to work remotely for up to 2 days per week in order to get a bit of the best of two worlds. On the one hand, we observed during the several lockdowns that we had that productivity and employee effectiveness was actually positively impacted. I heard many people say that over the past 2 days as well. Staff were less interrupted during certain work that required focus. Maybe after today's presentation, I have to say that required more cardiac coherence. I paid attention. They did not lose time in traffic. And at the same time, they were also around to spend more time with their families and adjust their working days a bit to their personal situation. So I think like many here, we learned that productivity for the organization and staff well-being are not communicating barrels where if one goes up, the other goes down. It can go hand in hand. On the other hand, we also do see the value of in-person meetings. I mean, the fact that many of you here today also as a reason. Yesterday, people said also this networking that is unique to international organizations. You can never replace it with online meetings. The value of informal exchanges in the corridor by the coffee machine, to just bump into a colleague and maybe find out that they're working on something similar or something that is of interest to you. Bounce of an idea. These are all exchanges that are very hard to organize online and things that also I personally missed during the pandemic, no matter how hard you try and still work this out with some colleagues. And I have to admit, it's also nice to just be in a meeting occasionally where you don't have to say you're still muted. At the same time, there is no one size fits all. I think that's also important. While, I mean, overall here, we get a sense that teleworking is something positive. I also observed that for some of our staff, and depending on their personal situation, they were feeling quite alone. isolated, were struggling with the fact of working remotely. Some people were sending me emails, well, I'm not equipped at home, I don't have a space, it's too hectic, can I please come back to work? At some point in Belgium, you needed a certificate from an employer to be allowed to go on the street. So people were actually asking me, please, can you give me a certificate? Because this whole teleworking thing is not working for me. So I see that some organizations are making a choice to actually make mandatory teleworking. That's not something we'll do, just because we want to maintain that flexibility, and then we want to show respect for the fact that everybody has their own experience, and it might not feel the same for everybody. So we will allow our staff within certain limits, of course, to shape your own working week. You have the early birds that like to start sooner than the ones that like to sleep a bit longer but are very productive and do their best work late in the evening. Then I'm not even talking about our regional managers, of course, who obviously are bound to certain time zones, and it's just more convenient for them to be online when our members are online. Yeah, pick up your children from school, drop them off. So squeeze in a small break somewhere in the afternoon and then reconnect in the evening. Those are all things which should be perfectly possible, and it's fine as long as the results are there. So I think there was a reference today as well to measuring impact, measuring results, and not just time that somebody spends behind the desk or behind the computer. I mean, I'm interested in the result, and then how you achieve it, that's then up to you. We also believe strongly that by maintaining this preparedness and flexibility in terms of equipment, technology, policy, it also positively impacts our organization to respond quicker and be prepared for a potential next emergency. And I hope, but let's see what happens, that it also provides more comfort to our staff. And it will reduce their stress and anxiety in case a new situation like this would ever emerge. I made the reference to technology needing to support the change. We will implement in the coming months a new human resource tool that will better support our hybrid way of working. I think it's safe to say, like many organizations, we were not ready for the challenges that COVID threw at us. That went from equipment to policies, but definitely also our tools supporting staff management. So we do want to increase our employee engagement, improve leave and teleworking management, performance measurement, focusing on the outcomes rather than present, communication with the staff, and also providing them more self-services applications, so that the barrier for them it's more accessible, it's quicker. If you're not necessarily behind the computer, you can still apply for a leave and all those kind of things. And then we also made sure that we had a dedicated human resource officer to drive this ambitious list of work. I mean, for those of you who don't know him yet, that's our esteemed moderator Said here. So he's actually a very versatile, multifunctional asset for the organization. But yeah, it's important to really have somebody dedicated to all these well-being related initiatives so that we don't get stuck in just ambitions. But somebody is actually around to drive the portfolio and push everybody to jump on the wagon and drive the work forward, creating a more positive workplace. He will be involved in data gathering, engaging the workforce, measuring results from staff engagement surveys, listening to feedback. So being available for staff whenever they need somebody to talk to, or when they have an issue and don't necessarily immediately want to raise it at management level, or improve policies, practices. So no pressure, Saidi, very ambitious list, but I'm confident that we can achieve all of this. We're not vain. We don't believe that we hold all the truths as an organization or as a management. So again, involving the staff is crucial for us. Make them part of the cultural change rather than just impose stuff on them. So that's why, as a standard, always any new policy that we develop is always consulted with staff committee. But we also try and measure, but maybe I'll not dive into that right now, but try to get some of their experience and feedback before we start implementing new stuff. Then maybe something that's maybe a side note, but still I find it very important, is we try and take care of the occasional light note. like we do small welcome back sessions after the summer, and we have relatively big staff turnover. So it's always great when people can come in, meet newcomers. We invite them to present themselves. People can put faces to the names. They have a short chance to get to know each other and engage. And that makes it then easier in this hybrid working model to reach out to a colleague, and the threshold hopefully becomes smaller for people to engage. Recently, we also organized a family Sunday where our staff were invited to bring their partners and children, and also their national dishes, so that everybody could share food and get to know each other, and maybe in a different context without the suits, and just have a more colloquial exchange. Just all of this to make the relationship more personal, to increase staff engagement. Hopefully that people see each other in a different light, and contributes hopefully to a more respectful attitude towards each other, which is important when you talk about well-being as well. Then one final remark before I conclude is that I feel it's important that we should not just try and announce or talk about changes like we're doing here today, but try to also carry it out ourselves, demonstrate it, and take part in it. I think, yeah, Claire, you mentioned it's deeply rooted in leadership. Yeah, it's in small things, you know. One observation I had during the pandemic. So at one point there was a lockdown. Everybody was at home with kids, family. So we were telling people, look, it's perfectly fine. We understand you have kids around. No harm in that. If they're in the meetings, please, we try to calm people down. Still, what I observed was I was in calls and I could see people like, yeah, so, okay, if you, or like, so I said, okay, this is not what I want, because people are in a call with me and they still feel some kind of embarrassment about, I have noise here, I have people. And so at one point I said, okay, we have to do something. So I started deliberately taking my meetings in my living room instead of my office space. So then my kids were the first ones to go like this. And then all of a sudden you see that this contributes to people just feeling at ease with the fact of, okay, rather than just saying it's fine. You demonstrate it, and I had positive feedback on it. I have to admit, unfortunately, it was mostly from some of our female staff. So in terms of gender equality, there's work to do, people. But yeah, I mean, little things like this, I think, can make the difference. So I think as a management, when you say certain things are okay, try to really demonstrate and be part of that. So to sum up, we want to focus on policies, equipment and information systems, human resources, and organizational culture.
Thank you so much, Hans, for the great work and also the initiatives that World Custom Organization is doing. I think because I'm part of it, so I guess I had to say that. Hans, we're running short of time and we have 15 minutes, so maybe I'm going to come back to you before I go to Eric and Claire. Maybe your final observations that you have in maybe a minute or two, because I know we were to talk about measuring and tracking well-being. I think you've already elaborated on that. Maybe you can give us some final remarks that you might have on this, and then I can go to Eric and Claire. Thank you.
I'll try to be brief in the interest of time. Now, I think tracking is indeed an important point, because obviously we come up with initiatives and we like to think we're doing a lot to improve employee satisfaction, but are we succeeding? I mean, it's all great to do this, but at some point you have to measure, are we achieving the goals? If yes, what worked well? Maybe on some things, what didn't work well? Do we need to adjust or not? Should we try something completely different? So yeah, staff engagement, talent management, those are really key pillars in our human resources strategy. So for ourselves, we've set goals that we track short, medium, and long term. We have the classic annual engagement survey, which we perform every fourth quarter of the year. But of course, you tend to see there is some kind of survey fatigue around. And so that's also something we have foreseen in the new HR tool. And I've heard some references yesterday and also just now by Eric. We plan on doing these pulses, which are a bit more dynamic. They're more on the ball. It allows you to more frequently consult staff just on a few short issues. For them, it's very dynamic light to take part because it's just 1 minute in their working day when they connect and boom, they get a pop-up and that's it. And now hopefully we will allow that. We hope that this will allow us to get a more timely feedback so that we can react more quickly to certain situations or problems that staff may be facing during the year, rather than waiting a full 12 months before taking a next measuring point. A new, let's say, a new parameter that we want to measure is our employee net promoter score. Which actually looks at the likelihood that our employees are to recommend WCO as a place to work. So we'll add that to the engagement surveys. We've also already included that in the exit interviews that we are conducting. Exit interviews can be a good source of information, as any filter that people might feel towards the employer at that point in time, hopefully or logically should be gone, and then you get more honest feedback. So with that, we hope to have another parameter to support us in our decision making, and then just with the tools leverage on existing data. I feel we're actually already quite rich in data, and I think it's the same for many organizations. If you think about it, we actually have a lot of information. For example, take performance evaluations. There's a lot of feedback in there. Yet the way we're processing it right now, it's still a lot of manual work. It's spread over the organization. So there might be things that are structural or systemic, but you don't necessarily spot them immediately. So by automizing this and incorporating this in the tools, we hope at a central level to get a better and quicker overview of all these trends and comments, and again react to them. So it's basically new tools to leverage on the information we have. I'll leave it at that because I realize I already passed your 2 minutes, Saidi. I'm sorry.
No problem. I think that was really rich, and we had to tackle that. Thank you so much, Hans, for your contribution. I'd like now to move on to Claire for your final submission. And I will, according to you, and from what you've had, we've mentioned quite a lot on technology. It's been brought up, smart technologies, how we're trying to, measure and also work around employee well-being using that. What are some of the tangible measures and initiatives that organizations should prioritize, and why?
I think your question was something related to employee branding and how to approach this, considering the EVP. There are two things that are really important. One is what is the experience of your people in the inside? And two is how is it perceived from your potential candidates in the outside? And there is a lot of transparency nowadays. People talk, they have their own networks, so they talk about what it feels like to work for this or this organization. You also have online platforms that create a lot of transparency in terms of the working conditions. So considering this, it's really important to make sure that you are congruent from what's happening in the inside and the image that you're trying to give yourself in the outside, and actually give the priority of what's happening inside. And in order to do that and look specifically, so to go back to your question, look specifically at what and how to prioritize, what is really important is to understand what matters in people's work life. What are the moments that matter the most, right? When you join a new organization, when you get assigned to a project, when you have the performance management, we've heard multiple times talking about performance management, it's really important. When your salary is paid on time, when you can decide when to take your holidays, etc. So those are key moments in the life of an employee. And this is the best way to prioritize where to focus the efforts on. So that's basically very quick. I'm sure I just had 2 minutes. Just wanted to close with some personal experience that has happened recently in a well-being project that I was doing. So I was conducting an interview And this person I was interviewing told me, you know, I'm a little bit tired of being assigned as a resource to a project. And I'm just wanting to bring this point about how we talk about things, the language, the vocabulary that then shapes how we behave. So that going back to the mindsets and the perspectives. And she said to me, I'd rather have a project assigned to me or a mission assigned to me, as opposed to being a resource assigned to a project. So just to close the point about, you know, the mindsets, the perspectives and the behaviors that can also be shaped by how we talk. That's it.
Thank you so much, Claire, for your insights. I'm really, really honored to have those contributions, and thank you. Last but not least, I'll end with Eric. In your closing remarks, how would you advise organizations that are interested in factoring in well-being in their EVPs to approach this process? And then you can also share your closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saidi. Now, I know, this late in the day you have to say, I'll be very brief, but I'm not going to say it because those of you who know me will laugh when I say that. But I'll really try to stick to the 2 minutes that I have as well. I think more than adding anything new, I would like to reinforce maybe some of the key messages. And the first one is just that the catalyst for culture and values, one hand, management practices, is of course leadership. Engagement and well-being initiatives, they don't happen by a miracle or accidentally. They have to be triggered by very deliberate and intentional leadership decisions. That's the first point. So the leadership team of the organization has to own it. At the ISO Central Secretariat, we've got an incredible human resource unit. They are forward-looking, and they propose and manage many of the well-being initiatives. But the ownership of engagement and well-being is with the organization's leadership. The second one is that if you want to move the needle on engagement and well-being, it must be a continuous strategy. It's not a once-off project that you set and then forget. I think, Claire, that you mentioned that if you do this, it can actually make things worse because you will raise expectations and then these are not materialized. So you need to make this a priority, set aside time to discuss, reflect, and manage this like a project. This means having a scope, goals, give responsibility and resources, and Hans, to your point, set your targets, get data, monitor progress. But you've got to manage it like a project. It's not a standalone initiative. Finally, 2 additional points that I can mention is to start with a proper assessment. It's very easy, like we heard today as well. There's a big menu, massive menu of well-being options, but involve your employees. Listen to them. Ask them what makes sense. Have a series of structured discussions where people can make proposals. We've heard about the employee engagement surveys, to solicit these ideas. And of course, there's a whole range of proposals that you can get through this. But the point is that engage people, be sincere about it, have 2-way communication, do follow-up surveys, well-being sessions, and ask for feedback. At the ISO Central Secretariat, we currently have focus groups and online surveys on the future of work. Well before the pandemic, we already had, hybrid working, allowed a level of flexibility. The technology was in place, but even now, we're asking ourselves, but what now? Is that the model? It might be, and that's fine. We're happy with it. Or there might be another model. So as I said, we've got the focus groups and online surveys on the future of work. And again, this is a project that's owned by the LT, the leadership team of the ISO Central Secretariat, with a dedicated project manager that's been assigned by our SPMO, the Strategy and Project Management Office. And then a final element that's still very much connected to leadership is for leaders to share their personal and professional struggles as a way of modeling psychological safety and showing how they prioritize mental health and well-being. And I've experienced it myself, that this example can be liberating. It can be very powerful for your staff. But again, it's not something that always comes automatically and easy for people. So again, you have to invest and actually put resources into training this and mentoring, your leadership and management to provide, these models and examples. Now, Hans, I'm not going to disappoint you. I'm going to end with something. Now, in this new paradigm in which we find ourselves, the old KPI, key performance indicators, don't hold water anymore. It's got 4 other meanings. KPI. It's keep your people interested, keep your people informed, keep your people involved, and then finally, and very importantly, keep your people inspired. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Eric, for those insights and wonderful ending. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of our panel discussion, where we had 3 eminent speakers sharing on how to embed well-being in our employee value proposition. We had Ms. Claire give us insights from the consulting world and how she has been able to support her staff. And then we had 2 practical examples from Mr. Eric and on how ISO are doing the process of embedding well-being in their EVP. And then finally, we took the case study for the World Customs Organization, and Mr. Hans was able to provide us some practical solutions on how we are embedding our EVP here at the World Customs and tracking it. Earlier on, we had 2 sessions that were well received. We had Ms. Bright and Ms. Melinda share the stress management, mental and physical health. These really brought out on how to practically do this, and it brought out the issues around stress and how we manage it. So thank you so much for that contribution. And the second panel was on well-being at work to promote diversity, inclusion, and integrity at workplace. And we had the very practical examples from the IMF director, the director HR in Iceland, and Ms. Natalie share their experiences through this. So we thank you for your contributions, everyone. And I would like to invite my colleague, Si Mohammed, to invite the director, and we close. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Saidi, and thanks to all the panelists. And now we'll give the floor to Mr. Tail Kang, Capacity Building Director at WCO, to deliver his closing remark.
Thank you, Si Mohammed. Thanks to the excellent panelists and enthusiastic audience. I think we could finish our conference very successfully. If we look back the history, the past, the past 2 years, the pandemic was a really nightmare. It was so frustrating, and we were stressed a lot with that the pandemic period. But that was not just a crisis, but it could also function as an opportunity. Think about the 2 days of work and 3 days, 2 days in the office and 3 days at home. It was not imaginable before the pandemic, but it gave us some opportunity to enjoy that some kind of welfare and well-being. So there will, I think there will, it seems that throughout this the conference that there were many reactions and the solutions to tackle these the difficulties and how to redesign the human resource management in the future. There were so many opinions and ideas, and maybe from this the sharing of ideas and the sharing the best practices. I think that we could set up some milestones, and we could make some kind of the big the goal for each customs administration and the private sector the companies. So I think there will this kind using this kind of a chance, I think we need to cooperate and collaborate more, because without sharing the ideas, it's almost impossible to make a very good the goal and very good milestone. So it was a very good chance for us to share ideas. Of course, the WCO will accompany our members to go forward to set up a new goal for redesigning of the human resources. Of course, Hans already told you the WCO's contribution to improve that kind of a situation. But if I'm allowed, that I want to give you very brief the explanation about the capacity building directorates the contribution to achieve this goal. So maybe we can divide into two categories. The first one is the technological part, and the second one is the human resource part. Well, frankly speaking, yesterday I was really impressed about the presentation of the Abu Dhabi Customs and the technical the improvement and technical the application was really marvelous. So I think it seems that there is mostly there is a consensus that the technological part is very important to set up to redesign the human resource the management. So if I give you some the contribution of the capacity building directory of the WCO. So WCO recently updated the e-learning courses, and we created many new courses, and we also created the virtual reality training program set, and we will deliver those training sets to the whole 28 regional training centers and ROCBs, so that they can enjoy the benefit of some kind of a remote the training and tele training. So I think this kind of chance will give some new landscape to how to use the technology for just for the new concept of the training. And of course, the capacity building directorate also created many algorithms, like the HS recommendation or undervalue detection algorithm, so that we can lessen the burden of the customs officers in work. And additionally, we are also planning to provide more training programs for data analytics, so that this kind of the technology advancement ultimately affect the HR areas and lessen the burden of the officers of the customs. In the human resource management, we have been working on holding the HR human resource conferences like this. We also provide some kind of stress management program to our members. Of course, throughout through these the result of these conferences, we are planning to make a compendium, and if possible, we will make guidelines, and then we will report the result of this the achievement to the relevant meetings like a capacity building committee and policy commission and council. And if I add some more the announcement, there will be the Customs Work Organization Forum will be held on the 24th of November this year, and the invitation letter will be sent to you next week. So we will continue this kind of effort to make an opportunity to share ideas and experiences among members. In addition to that, like every panelist said, that the leadership is also important, because the quiet quitting generation is really difficult to handle. So based on the classical the leadership, then it's very hard to deal with those generation. And of course, whether or not it's good or bad, we are facing the digital era. So we need some kind of a new leadership to face this kind of digital era. So we need to incorporate all these factors into the new leadership management, the theory and the practice, and the training program and the mission program. So we will do that. And then one of the things is that in this new year, as some panelists said, that the evaluating the performance is really hard because of 2 days at home and 3 days in office. How can we evaluate the performance of these things? And it's really hard. So we need to think about the incorporating another qualitative factor for the evaluation, the whole activities of our officers and in the customs area. So we are working on how to develop new the evaluation mechanism. Of course, for the time being, we will apply this new technique to only the capacity building, the training programs. But if this is successful, we are planning to expand this effort to the wide area of the whole the missions and the activities of the WCO. And again, then I would like to express my the appreciation to the interpreters and then the technicians, and then of course for the financial support, I'd like to express my special thanks to the WCO, and I hope that because we already talked about the well-being and the welfare, so I hope that please remember the deep breath and we learned today. Please keep safe and healthy when you go back to your home country. And I hope that we will meet again in the CWOF, the Customs Work Organization Forum in November, and possibly in the Capacity Building Committee next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. This is over and out from Brussels. Have a good one. See you next time.